after.
Okay.
So, is Asia here to do the Redistricting Commission presentation?
I don't see that she's on, Rosie.
Rosie, she was having trouble getting in and I sent her my email.
Okay.
She just got it, so she should be here soon.
Okay, let's start roll call. I think
Oh.
we may have quorum. So when I call your board, please say your name so it could be recorded on the record. Community Board 1.
Good morning, this is Tammy Meltzer.
Community Board 2.
Good morning, Janine Kiley.
Board 3. Community Board 4. Community Board 5. Community Board 6.
Good morning, Kyle Thied.
Board 7.
Morning, Stephen Brown present.
Community Board 8.
Russell Squires here.
Community Board 10.
Good morning, Rosie. Chuck here.
Oh, Community Board 9.
Barry Weinberg here.
Your volume is a little off. I don't know.
Yeah, sorry, Barry Weinberg's here.
It's bad, Barry. I don't know what's wrong with it, but it's bad.
Community Board 10.
Good morning, Cicely Harris, Community Board 10.
Community Board 11.
Good morning, Xavier Santiago, Community Board 11.
Board 12. Okay, so we have a quorum, and I'm sure other people will join us in a bit. And I'll call their names whenever they get here. Is Asia?
Yeah, she's here.
Okay, you can start your presentation.
Thanks so much. And I know you guys have a full schedule, so I will be very brief. I'm Asia Badi. I'm the Director of Public Engagement for the New York Independent Redistricting Commission. Everything I'm telling you is on our website, which you can see right there on my virtual background that I'm not very good at pointing at. But you may ask what the Independent Redistricting Commission is. This is the first time the commission has come together. We are part of a 2014 proposition that implemented a constitutional amendment to implement historic changes with the intent to achieve a fair and readily transparent process to redraw the state legislative and congressional lines. We're only focused on Congress, State Assembly, and State Senate. And the Independent Redistricting Commission is made up of 10 commissioners. 4 are appointed by the Republican legislature, 4 by the Democrats. The 4 Republicans appoint an independent, the 4 Democrats appoint an independent, and the 10 are the commissioners. There is more information on each of the commissioners and their bios and the breadth and depth of their experience and knowledge that they bring to the commission. The commissions are tasked in the Constitution to submit preliminary draft maps by September 15th, which was last week. Our draft maps are live on our website. You can actually now, there is an interactive portion of the map. You can check out your neighborhood and your community and see what the different plans would look like for you. And then we are mandated to hold 12 public hearings across the state. The cities at which we will hold them are mandated, and the commissioners added 2 extra ones in Binghamton and Lake Placid because they felt that was important. But prior to even submitting the draft maps, commissioners felt that they needed to hear from the community. We held a listening tour in August. The videos of those listening tours you can see on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. We went across the state virtually and were able to hear from those members of the community across the state and use that to really synthesize and think about how the new draft maps would be drawn. And just as a timeline, our final draft maps are due early January to the legislature. So I'm here because we have now, have these draft maps. We want people to be able to take a look at them and be able to submit their comments, submit maps. On our website, there's a participate tab. You can go there, you can sign up to receive updates. You can sign up to submit an alternate map that you would like to see or show where your community is, your community of interest, or to write written comment, and then sign up to speak at one of our hearings. New York will be November 10th. We start our hearings October 20th and we make our way downstate. So New York is November 10th. We'll be having hearings in Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn. So do let everybody know. And I just wanted to mention, I mean, the commissioners are really committed to the public process and they really want to hear from the community. So I know with your community boards, not only is it the board membership, but all the neighborhood associations and organizations and tenants associations that you're connected to, please get the word out. We'll be sending out emails with more information if you could share it. That's it. Any questions or?
Any questions, if you could raise your virtual hand? Tammy,
Would you mind dropping the links into the chat?
Sure.
That would be super helpful to be able to share with all of us versus having to click back through a variety of things. And if you could read the website out for the record, that would be lovely.
Sure. It's nyirc.gov. This is our main site. Do you want me to give you the different tabs or just because once you get there, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but there is a participate tab that you can actually participate. You do have to sign up on the website, which means that we know sort of your address and contact info if we have any questions. But in order to sign up for a hearing, as well as to sign in to submit info, there's also a tab called submissions that you can see previously submitted written comment and maps by region.
And are you going to be loading up in there what the current elected officials have, their testimonies and things like that? Is there a place that you see the public testimony that's?
Yeah, so it's called submissions. Do you want me to briefly share my screen and show you where those things are? Would that be helpful? Is that?
You can go ahead, Asia, if you want to share your screen, you're able to.
There. So do you see the New York, the website now?
Yes.
Okay, so you'll sign up under here. Let me just quickly, well, I won't log in, of course, now, but under submissions are previously submitted comments. It's actually members of the public to elected officials. It's everybody. There were people that submitted comments across the state. We compiled it by region that they mentioned. And then there were some general sort of comments that were New York State in general or New York City or covered all 5 boroughs. There's participate where you can send in comments, submit a map. You can sign up to give testimony. You can also email or mail in your snail mail. And we have social media. And then the draft plans, there are zip documents, as well as we just added this interactive map. And just to keep in mind, there is this legend that there are 2 sets of maps, one called names and the other one called letters. You can toggle on and off to see which ones you want to see. And I think that's it. And then the current maps are there through another route. So if you want to compare it to the current.
And is there any way, what I can't find is a way to overlap to see what it currently is and what the proposed, is there?
Yeah, there are third-party sites that are providing that. They do also have some political data so we can't put that on our website. But there are some sources that are doing that. Ours keeps to just the simple of the draft map lines.
Tammy, if you take a look at the third-party map I put in the chat, it'll let you do exactly what you're asking.
Yeah, I did. It's a pity that that we couldn't get that as an official sort of thing.
are there any more questions? Seeing none, can I have a motion to accept today's agenda of September 23rd?
Rosie, Janine has her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Janine.
Put in. I just was on my system crashed. If you could reshare the links in the chat, because again,
for people like me whose system crashed or people who joined late. Thank you.
So before I ask for a motion, let me just say today is a public hearing. So it's we have a lot of people who have signed up. And so what we're going to do is
Recording in progress.
we're going to start. Someone's got an echo going on. Is that me? Okay. We're going to start the presentation. We're going to go to chairs Q&A. At 10:30, we're going to start the vote for those people who have a hard stop. And if you don't have a hard stop, then if you could pass, and we will come back later and get other people to vote. Council members will be joining us later. There's a lot of hearings today, and so they're all voting at City Hall, and then they'll join us at some point to vote. We'll start the public testimony, and chairs at use your discretion. If you decide that we should do chair reports, we'll start it. If someone wants to make a motion that you submit your reports in writing, then we will add them to the minutes if a motion is made and passed. So I guess we could just move forward with a motion for the agenda and a second. Do I have a motion?
So moved by Barry.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second, thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 One against? Anyone abstaining? The ayes have it. Okay, I'm going to turn it over now to the DCP and DOT, who will start the presentation on open restaurants.
Thank you, Rosie. And good morning, everyone. Carolyn will be sharing the screen, and while that's getting pulled up, I did want to wish everybody a good morning to all of the guests, Madam Borough President and esteemed chairs. I'm Jennifer Santa Ynez. I'm the Manhattan Deputy Borough Commissioner at the New York City Department of Transportation. On behalf of Borough Commissioner Pinkar, I'd like to thank the Borough President's Office for giving us the opportunity to present today, alongside my colleagues at DCP City Planning, an update on the Permanent Open Restaurants Program. This is one of those mornings where we have our budget consultation as well as an East Midtown Governing Group meeting. So Ed and I will be splitting this meeting, and we're looking forward to hearing our feedback. This morning, I'm also joined by my colleague, Jackie Lazaro, Borough Planner for my office. She will be presenting on DOT's behalf, as well as our sister agency, DCP, including Carolyn Grossman-Marr, the Director of Regional Planning. I want to thank you all again for your partnership and efforts in making sure that we have time to discuss the future of the Permanent Open Restaurants Program and talk through concerns and issues and next steps for the text amendment changes. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Jackie to just begin our presentation. Thank you all.
Good morning, everyone. Again, I want to thank everyone for giving us the opportunity to speak about the future of DOT streets. And before we begin, I want to make it clear that while this presentation will cover both sidewalk and roadway dining, DOT and city planning are asking for your opinion on the specific sidewalk cafe text amendment. And now, actually, if you could go back to the previous slide. Thank you. So during COVID, DOT was directed to create the Open Restaurants Program, allowing restaurants to conduct their business in the public right away. Since the launch over a year ago, over 11,000 restaurants have participated, which helped save about 100,000 jobs. To many, this program has been a lifesaver, not just to the restaurant industry, but also to the city that has seen outdoor dining and the incredible vitality it can bring to our sidewalks and streets. As some of you might know, DOT ran a small pilot of public roadway seating pre-COVID with only about 25 setups citywide. DCP will discuss in more detail the history of sidewalk cafes during their presentation. Next slide. This past year has taught us many lessons that are critical to informing how we proceed with developing a permanent program. On the positive side, we think that the robust participation in the emergency program was helped by three things. First, unlike the pre-emergency sidewalk cafe program, no geographies were off limits. Any restaurant with ground floor frontage and sidewalk or roadway space that met the criteria could participate. Second, the program was easy and free to access. Unlike the pre-COVID sidewalk cafe program, which required months of multiple reviews by multiple agencies. And third, the element of roadway dining gave restaurants new options, particularly those that might have had enough space on the sidewalk to accommodate a cafe. And of course, there were some challenges. For example, the speed of the rollout under emergency circumstances created some confusion. As DOT learned more about operating a program like this, and the program was extended by the mayor into the winter, some of the guidance had to change along the way to keep everyone safe. DOT also learned more about the challenges specific to outdoor seating and its interaction with the roadway. For instance, we've heard from agencies like FDNY and MTA that there were issues with turning radius and safety signs being blocked. Safety is of the utmost importance here and will remain so. So we will continue to work with our agency partners as we develop future guidelines. And finally, enforcement has been complicated on multiple fronts. On the one hand, you have restaurants who are dealing with a lot and who have felt over-inspected by too many different people. On the other, you have some communities, particularly the mobility impaired, concerned about under-enforcement. Next slide. The emergency program has seen tremendous participation, and in October, the City Council overwhelmingly voted in favor of the bill to make it permanent. This requires changing a number of different laws that control outdoor dining in non-emergency situations. I'm going to discuss what we're proposing for the permanent program and then return to the topic of legal changes needed to effectuate it. Next slide. To start, we anticipate that DOT will administer a permanent option for both sidewalk seating and roadway seating with similar rules to the current sidewalk cafes, but available citywide. We want to be sensitive to the community and traveling public, minding sidewalk clear paths and other rules around sound and hours of operation. Additionally, the city is proposing that the new program will not operate during the colder months, but leave some opportunity for a hardship waiver that would allow restaurants to keep their setups where storage is prohibitive. Next slide. One final, specific design guidelines will be very clear and will revolve around these principles that balance the use of sidewalk space by a restaurant, but maximize the experience of openness and activation to the general public. For most of the city, we're proposing requiring 8 feet clear paths or half the sidewalk width, whichever is greater. In some areas with higher foot traffic, the city is proposing 12 feet or half the sidewalk width. And for other special cases where it may still make sense despite a narrow sidewalk, we're looking at a waiver to go down to 6 feet, which would be co-reviewed by the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities. Next slide. Switching gears, I think the introduction of the roadway option is a tremendous new opportunity for restaurants, especially those who may have narrow sidewalks. The city is working on how this will be set up permanently, but we have setups in parking lanes. But we will have setups in parking lanes except in prohibited zones. Maintain public safety, have clear guidance and enforcement on sound, and comply with ADA requirements. In the future, any roadway setups will have to look more a lot like what's on this slide, not the fully enclosed structures that we've seen a lot of. Next slide. In looking at both moving the legal authority to run the program to DOT and in creating new processes for the roadway setups, The city is looking to streamline the review process as much as possible, while leaving in place the essential roles of agency and public review. Next slide. 3 steps are needed to advance the permanent program. First, the focus for today is the removal of locational prohibitions through zoning. It's key to unlocking the full citywide universe of applicability and consolidating control and accountability for the program under a single agency. We are also working with the City Council, who strongly support this program, to enact appropriate legislation which will update the laws governing sidewalk cafes and then create a new set of laws and rules to govern roadway cafes. Next slide. Following zoning and legal changes, we anticipate rulemaking that formalizes many of the program design and application details, and then a formal opening up of the application window for a new program. Though we are beginning a process of developing the future program, the current emergency program is expected to be in effect as is for the next 1.5 years or so. The expectation is that restaurants will have ample time to transition into a new process if they choose to, with minimal operational disruption. Changing zoning is the first critical step to making this program permanent. But as you can see on this timeline, there are multiple steps to developing the full program. Each step will welcome public input and review. Next slide. In closing, we welcome feedback and encourage all to visit our website as we develop all of the elements. Once again, the roadway portion of this presentation is preliminary, and our primary purpose in presenting is to gather feedback on DCP's proposed text amendment changes. I'll now turn it over to DCP to talk about the text amendment changes.
Great. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you, Madam Borough President, staff, and community board members for the time today. My name is Carolyn Grossman, and I'm going to walk you through the specifics of the zoning text amendment relative to the sidewalk cafes that is part of this larger package of changes on open restaurants, which I know many of you are already familiar with. So for those, for some, this may be new, for some, this may be a recap. And again, just to say, the zoning component, as we just left off, is one of really 3 components of the legal structure. They're both are legislative, looking at changes to the sidewalk cafe program, particularly moving that authority from the prior DCWP over to DOT, as well as the whole creation of a new roadway program. But what we're really looking at here is changes to where sidewalk cafes can exist in the city, and removing those, which we really think is key to allowing the program to be fully universal throughout the city and to consolidating both control and accountability for the future sidewalk cafe program with the roadway cafe program under DOT. So what we're proposing is to delete Article 1, Chapter 4 of the zoning resolution in its entirety, which is effectively removing the zoning restrictions on where different sidewalk cafes can exist in the city. We're also proposing to remove other related language in special districts and other technical language I'll talk about a little bit further. The effect of all of that, which is to remove from the zoning resolution any rules about where cafes can exist, which again, allow us to remove what we think is ultimately a duplicative form of bureaucracy and to move the control for where sidewalk cafes will exist over to DOT based on sidewalk conditions and to move away from a neighborhood by neighborhood prohibition system. I'll talk a little bit about why. Sidewalks cafes have been in New York City for a long time, and with them, the rules have evolved over really many, many decades. In the 70s, when ULURP first came into being, every sidewalk cafe that wanted to exist had to go through a full ULURP process. Almost immediately, it was understood that that was a very cumbersome and prohibitive process, both for the restaurants, but also for all of the administrating bodies to have to review every single cafe through the full ULURP process. So in an effort to streamline that process, the City Planning Commission adopted a framework in 1980 that attempted to make it easier by naming specific areas of the city where sidewalk cafes could exist. Since that time in 1980, many dozens of amendments have occurred to that chapter, making more and more refined and nuanced decisions about where cafes can or can't exist, or what kinds of cafes can or can't exist, to create the patchwork we have today. And up until COVID, that chapter really stood as the gateway, as the gatekeeper to where cafes could exist in the city. If you were applying for a cafe, you went to the Department of Consumer and Workforce Protection. Question one is, are you in an area where a cafe is allowed? If not, go away. If two, now you can start to look at both the citing criteria and other administrative procedures, including community board review, that would be required to go through for that process. And as all of you know, these rules, as part of the Open Restaurants program, were suspended and remain suspended to this day. The Sidewalk Cafe program works in a couple of ways. We have 3 different kinds of cafes that are specified in the zoning. A unenclosed cafe, which is typically requiring an 8-foot clear path and temporary and removable tables and chairs, as you see on the left here. A small unenclosed cafe, which is like a regular unenclosed cafe, but smaller, typically a single row of tables and chairs. Or an enclosed cafe, which still requires the same clear path, but allows you to have an extension of your building with light building materials and requiring transparency onto the street. Still to this day, you can go on our website, zola.nyc.gov, and take a look at the zoning regulations about where these different kinds are allowed in the city. The zoomed out version of that is the map on the right, and the code is on the left. You can see yellow is areas where only the small cafes are allowed. Purple is where small or regular unenclosed cafes are allowed. Green is where any kind of cafe is allowed. And importantly, you can see 2 categories where cafes are not allowed. Red, which is areas where the zoning resolution specifically prohibits them, and blue, which is residential areas, which is essentially an inferred prohibition. We'll talk a little bit about how those work later, but very large areas of the city where no cafes are allowed. Once we suspended the rules, we've had extraordinarily robust usage of the sidewalk program. We've moved from approximately 1,200 cafes in the city to over 11,500 citywide, which includes 10,000 on the sidewalk itself. And quite notably, not less important for this meeting, but important for the success of the program, many of those cafes have been outside of Manhattan, where we had not seen very considerable use of cafe programs in the past. And here are some of the reasons, because again, many of the locations where we're seeing cafes were limited by the zoning that we had in place. We estimate that of those 10,000 restaurants that are using sidewalk cafes under the Open Restaurants program, approximately 2,500 of those restaurants would not have been able to function as they are if the zoning were in place today. So effectively, what we are doing is making room for these restaurants to have a pathway potentially to a future program, although their participation in that future program will have many other steps, especially in ensuring that they can meet the physical siting criteria of the program, as well as the full community board review that will be possible once the permanent program is back in place. So just to go through the specific reasons here, you can see again to that color coding, the red, these are open restaurants mapped. The red dots are restaurants where they exist, those cafes exist in places where there were specific prohibitions. The blue are non-conforming restaurants in residential districts, and the yellow is where restaurants would have been limited by the cafe designation. So why did these rules exist? They exist, the prohibitions accrued over many decades and for a number of different reasons, ranging from they seemed like a good idea at the time to, just sort of by happenstance. For instance, we have made it impossible to put a cafe under any elevated railway in the city, which covers many significant commercial corridors. Presumably, when those rules were put in place, people believed that the noise or dust or unsightliness of an elevated corridor made it impossible to have outdoor dining. But as we see in the emergency condition, there are many good examples, as you see in the top left here, where having outdoor dining is not only plausible, it is a helpful activation of that retail street. What's important about that condition is that there is still enough sidewalk space to allow for clear passage, right? And you can see this is a relatively wide sidewalk. They might be cheating a little bit with that grilled cheese sandwich sign, but in general, there is the 8-foot clear that really allows this to continue to be a functioning sidewalk. And that's a siting criteria, not a neighborhood criteria. So we really believe that the zoning is not working in a way where a siting criteria and physical rules and review will work much better. Other examples of this are special districts, Dumbo and East New York, featured on the bottom left, places where we had just prohibited sidewalk cafes. This text amendment will now allow those areas to have cafes, but again, only if they're able to meet that siting criteria, particularly that 8-foot or the clear path rules. In the top right, certain special district areas like Midtown have been prohibited. This is a cafe close to Grand Central that would not have been allowed to have outdoor seating at all in the past. For areas like this is one of the places where we're proposing a modest change to the underlying sidewalk cafe program that always required 8-foot. In a highly trafficked area like this, where we're adding new access, we would propose that the clear path be required at 12 feet. So Tommy's here would still be able to participate in essentially the way that they are currently showing it, where they have a single table and chairs and approximately, I think it looks like they have a little more than 12 feet wide in this picture. So that would be possible on very wide streets, but with that additional clear path requirement. And again, the fourth category here, the R district. So as you all know, restaurants are not typically allowed in a residence district, but we have many restaurants that exist in residence districts for a number of reasons, essentially predating the zoning that's there. We estimate there's about 3,000 restaurants that exist in residential districts citywide, and there's about 1,000 of those that are participating in the open restaurants program today. Again, those restaurants would not have an avenue to any outdoor dining at all unless they went through a commercial rezoning. In the past, some restaurants have chosen to go through a commercial rezoning, but it's extraordinarily prohibitive for all of the reasons that we all know, that ULURP is, a very intense commitment just to get a few outdoor tables and chairs. So this program will alleviate that burden and allow an existing restaurant to access outdoor cafe just the same way any other restaurant would. Sorry, there we go. Other changes that appear in the text amendment, a lot of cleanup text where there are cross references and definitions relating to outdoor cafes. We're removing in certain sections of the city, there is text that would preclude an operable window, as you see in the picture here, from servicing an outdoor restaurant. So we'd be allowing for that takeout window to exist. In several other areas of the city, there are enclosure provisions that prevent something like a garage door or the opening up of your facade. We want to make sure that that text is not precluding a restaurant from having an outdoor cafe. So we've clarified to make sure that in those cases, it's clear that the the open restaurants program is not a factor in that. And then we're finally similarly ensuring that places where there is a sidewalk widening provision, that is also not relevant to the functioning of open restaurants. And all of this, again, is really designed to put restaurants on an even playing field where, and a transparent one. I think our goal is that in the future, the public and a restaurateur and the administrators of this program aren't trying to understand what zoning was done 30 years ago to create a certain sidewalk, that you can really have a plain language understanding of a building and a curb and a sidewalk, and that the rules apply in that way. And that we think will also help with the public transparency aspect of this, of enforcement and making sure that clear paths are clear in the way that they are required to do. So just to finish up, a quick zoom in on what's happening in Manhattan today. This is again that map of how the The current the suspended sidewalk cafe regulations apply across the island of Manhattan. You can see some significant prohibition areas in Midtown, in the East and West Village and on 125th Street, as well as a little bit scattered through the Upper East Side. You can see certain enclosure prohibitions in the purple that occur throughout the borough. And then you can see, of course, significant residential districts that, occur on most non-commercial streets. Prior to COVID, the island of Manhattan had just under 1,000 licensed sidewalk cafes. You can see the breakdown here on the left. And we're now looking at almost 5,000 cafes on the island of Manhattan. Again, really extraordinary usage of the outdoor dining program, as I think we have all experienced, with particularly 1,600 on the sidewalk and 2,700 that are on both the sidewalk and the roadway. Relative to this text amendment, there are in red on the map, approximately 550 existing open restaurants that are prohibited by zoning, and 410 restaurants that are in residential areas, which are also effectively prohibited by zoning. So in total, we're looking at about 1,000 restaurants that were the rules to turn on tomorrow would have no avenue into outdoor dining. And that's what this text amendment is designed to address. As Jennifer and Jackie spoke to, this is part of a multi-pronged process. The text amendment was referred out in June and has a technical deadline of September 27th. I say technical because I know there are boards for whom that 90-day, because it went through the summer, is still a hindrance. We know there are a few that will be continuing to look at this into early October. City planning is, of course, always committed to hearing the recommendations at whatever point we receive them. So just, please know that we're mindful of that flexibility. But we are expecting that this will come back to city planning for a hearing on October 6th and beginning their review. At the same time, the legislative actions that would move the authority for sidewalk cafes and all of those pre-existing rules over to DOT is in process with the city council. Following all of those rules, there is a rulemaking process through CAPA that would happen sometime next year, following that application process, all of leading to a transition. And I say all of this to, again, really reemphasize, this is a process that we have started now because there's an extraordinarily long lead time and complexity to the many things that need to happen for a new program to come up and running and really transition the many, many restaurants we have existing in emergency authority into something that is a more well-regulated and a permanent licensure again. So with that, I will pull my screen down and we are happy to discuss the text amendment or other questions that have come up.
Okay, so first, some administrative stuff. We've been joined by CB12, Eleazar Bueno, CB11, Nelsa Arama, and CB4, Lowell Kern. Is there anyone here from CB3 or CB5? Okay. We're going to go to Q&A, and I just want to make clear to everyone else who's listening, the Q&A is just for the chairs of the community boards. The public will have an opportunity to give their testimony after Q&A and after our first round of votings for those chairs who have a hard stop. We will have 1.5 minutes for public testimony. And with that, I will go to chairs. Eleazar Bueno.
Hi, Rosie. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I think the one good thing that came out of the suspension of this law is that business owners felt that they were getting away from having that boot from down their throat. Historically, a lot of these laws and measurements have been punitive, exclusive, and almost like a punishment tool for a lot of the city agencies. when it came to businesses applying for sidewalk cafes. So my question really is, is this going to increase more red tape and bureaucracy for any new permits once this law is reinstated, or what really is the plan behind this presentation?
Sure, I can take that, and Jennifer or Jackie, please jump in where you want. First of all, I sympathize. I think the graphicness of boot on your on you is something that we've certainly heard, and I think there's a real balance here between businesses that I think have rightly for many years felt squeezed by government, and having the right level of regulation to make sure that the city is protected in one of our most precious locations, the sidewalk, which there's so many needs and so many users for. So where we're trying to go with this, with the sidewalk cafe program, is a version where there is less regulation, maybe less onerous regulation, where we're able to ease that pre-COVID period, but there will certainly be more regulation than there is in this emergency period, where there's really quite little. Like, the program was stood up under emergency circumstances, and I think that's been extraordinarily successful in the robustness of the program. But also, I think, as we've talked, responsible for some of the challenges that we're seeing. So I think what the city is trying to do here is strike that right balance and get to a place where we're able to keep the robustness and the vitality that the Sidewalk Cafe program has brought during this period, but also, go back to a world where we really feel like the sidewalks are staying clear, that a fire truck can get to a hydrant in an emergency, where restaurants are, not, abusing the noise code, right? That they're shutting down at the time of hours of operation. So that is a very hard balance to strike. I really appreciate you bringing it up, because it's something that we are struggling with, and every rule matters, right? Because it's really all of them together, I think, that really create that feeling of being, being strangled. So that's something that we're just incredibly mindful of. And it's really, again, I think we are, by necessity right now, there's very few rules in place. By necessity, there will be more rules in the permanent program, but the goal is really to try and keep that in a way that is manageable while still, transparent and protecting the quality of life for the whole city.
And Carolyn, if I may add, Eliezer, thank you for the question. I do think that one of the main purposes of shifting over management of permanent open restaurants to one agency, DOT, is to also allow, one single source to really try to coordinate any other street work, utility work, quality of life needs, as well as pedestrian clearances, all within the public right of way. So DOT already manages the latter, and we're primed and ready to increase our headcount for the open restaurants program and ensure that we'll be able to share more about the application and permanent process very soon.
Well, just my add, just a quick second. Restaurants are still in survival mode. Let's keep that in mind. Economically, we're still having, we're not breathing yet. So just want to be mindful of make you guys realize that we're still not over the hump. And a lot of these rules, and again, I want to be as transparent and reiterate it, they're not really towards the survival of these businesses and the economic development of some of these businesses. Yeah, there are rules that need to be implemented in order to safeguard the city as a whole, but we're still in survival mode. And I thank you for your wonderful answers.
And I thank you for that comment too. We are very aware that this is, that we're not out of the woods, but it's something really that we have to be so mindful of. Certainly at city planning, we're taking a look at the data all the time at, restaurant vacancies and, at how much spending has returned. And it's really still very, I think there's a perception that because people are out at the diners that everything is fine now, but certainly we're with you. That's certainly why the emergency program also will continue for some time, but it's also why we have to be mindful that even the permanent program, has to be very sensitive to owners and should be, even if we weren't coming out of COVID, that's really important, that this is, the restaurant industry is part of the lifeblood of our main streets.
Barry Weinberg, followed by Lowell Kern, and then Tammy Meltzer. Barry.
Right. Rosie, can you hear me okay?
Yes, it's much better.
Okay. So I have a question. The community board, CB9 broadly supports the idea of removing, the restrictions on where these cafes can operate in our district. I think that, it makes sense. But we have grave concerns about the DOT rulemaking process, which hasn't been, adequately explained for us, and the outcome of that process in the form of and you'll see that in the stipulations from our reso. My question after seeing CB7's reso is, why could this ULURP, this, zoning text change, why could that not have been delayed, withdrawn now and then introduced concurrently with the proposed DOT rules? That seems to make a lot of sense. And, you're asking community boards to give up a process that they've been doing for decades, that we're very familiar with, that makes sense to us, and that mostly produces good outcomes. And you're asking us to kind of, wait and see, and we'll make some rules that'll address these concerns, but we haven't had a chance to see those rules. And in the meantime, anyway, the emergency program is going to be in effect for the next 2 years. So given that you have a 2-year grace period, why not take the time to withdraw the zoning text amendment and then, introduce it concurrently with clearer, at least a draft of the DOT rules?
So I want to take it in reverse order and just say, I think there's just continued to be some confusion about this point. And a lot of concern that we're taking away a process from community boards. We are not taking away a process from community boards. Community boards prior to COVID and guaranteed under the charter have a responsibility or have an opportunity to review sidewalk cafes. That is not going away. So in the future, as was the case under the DCWP program, sidewalk cafe applications will be referred to community boards. And that's, again, I just want to say 100 times, that's not changing. We're not taking that responsibility away from community boards. We're also not fundamentally changing the sidewalk cafe citing rules, right? So there is a very developed body of law under the DCWP program of how we think about sidewalks, the clear path rules, temporary and removable materials, hours of operation, noise controls, distances from hydrants and city bike stations and, newsstands and all of that. All of that is very developed law. And as you say, is something that I think the city has quite a bit of experience with. So what we're contemplating is not fundamentally disrupting that and creating something different. What we're looking at is modest places where we can update it or make it slightly easier. Things like, in the past, there was a notarized engineering drawing required that was, we understand, was quite prohibitive and quite intensive. So we're looking at, could we replace that with a form of technology where you're able to get a map with all of the same information or maybe better, but doesn't create that sort of, dinosaur approach to site planning. We're looking at, were the distances from a city bike station correct and aligned with DOT's own, contemporary master siting criteria. So there are some things that we're looking at where we might be able to nip to change that. That goes through the CAPA process. That's how it always has been. If we were changing it under DCWP, would be the same process, and that requires public review as well. So, all of that to say, from our perspective, the sidewalk cafe program is changing in very modest ways. The most important way in which it's changing is that the authority will be moved from one agency to another. And I think, the city has been really transparent about that process. So, that's really the driving thinking is there are a lot of different steps to do here. The zoning text amendment, which relates only to the sidewalk cafe program, is the longest lead period. And we've been charged by both the mayor and the council to get this done on a timeline. And so we moved forward with a text amendment that is making modest changes to an existing body of law. The roadway program is very different and hasn't existed under law. And so I think that what we're hearing is a lot of different feedback, very rightly, about how that program comes into being. And there's a lot more work to do to figure out how those rules work. So in that circumstance, right, I think the city is taking its time to get those rules right and hear feedback. And again, make sure that there is an ability to, to interact and iterate that publicly into the future. But we don't see the changes, the modest changes of allowing, several thousand restaurants that would have otherwise been precluded from the existing sidewalk cafe program as inherently tied to answering those roadway programs at the same time.
Lowell.
I want to be very clear here that CB4 supports the open restaurants program, but I've got to piggyback on what Barry was just saying. We have major process issues with the way this is going about. You're basically taking away protections from special districts, from residential districts, sidewalk widening protections. You're throwing all those regs out and saying, basically, we'll figure that out later. That's going to be DOT's problem. They'll figure that out later. But we're going to throw out all the regs that protect you now. And that's not acceptable to CB4. The vote at our board, the letters you've received were unanimous in this, that this is, if you'll pardon the phrase, ass backwards, that this should be the last piece we do, is to remove the zoning regulations when we know what we're getting. We cannot support any resolution. We have a problem with the current borough board resolution because it's a deny unless, and we feel it should be an outright deny because this is ill-timed, ill thought out, and you're basically taking away all the protections without telling us what we're going to get. And this should wait until DOT gets through its process. Thanks, Rosie.
Thank you. If there's no responding comment, I will move on to Tammy, followed by Janine. Tammy?
Well, I'm glad I wasn't first, but I sit in 100% agreement with the chairs who have gone before me. The open restaurant program has been a lifeline, but it is also a lifeline within Community Board 1 in a time where we didn't have a ton of people who were here. There was so many of our neighborhood fled during the pandemic. It is not enough for DCP to tell us that we will have review, we will keep review. It actually doesn't mean anything until the new program is developed. We have experience with DOT. DOT does notification, not engagement, because they are tasked with safety. They are not tasked with quality of life for sidewalk cafes and restaurants. That is not a purview, nor is there something that they're very good at. We can't even get proper accountability for placards, for parking, for traffic violations. So while I appreciate the thought of this is a great concept, we don't see the details. We don't get to say, in terms of a community input with DOT, before the applicant comes to them, like it is with the sidewalk cafe. They come, they talk to us, they negotiate, and they work out with the community surrounding this location. Size, hours, noise. All of that is not possible. DOT, I'll just use an example, when they are looking at doing cargo bike corrals, they work with the applicant, they complete the process, and then they inform the community board. And you have an opportunity for feedback. We are not included in the process as you are suggesting. We are notified of the process afterwards. That is not for public benefit and public realm and for quality of life. DOT's mandate is not quality of life for the residential population and the working population who live in the buildings and surrounding. The qualifications of residential, guess what? Community Board 1, we are a mixed use community. So we don't fit the zoning that you have that works well. Practically every building in Lower Manhattan is both residential and commercial, which means that the zoning change doesn't really work. We agree 100% that it has been a lifeline. There are many really wonderful things, but I am distressed that this was baked during a pandemic, did not include community board or any kind of feedback. It was baked internally, top down. What about other businesses who would want to have sidewalk cafe use? What about any retail? Do they not have access and opportunity? This is public space that you're giving away for free without public purview. It's top down. I don't understand when we go until 2022 and 2023 with the executive orders protecting this, why we should be voting now. We should hear the program, know what we're voting, have the details, and then be able to say, there are a few things to work out, no problem, but not vote on this. It'll be great when you get it. That's like having somebody run for an office with a bag over every policy that they have and behind a curtain. Don't worry, we're going to move the curtain. It'll be perfect when you get it. I don't think this is the right timing. Thank you.
Okay. I'm basically going to repeat what a lot of people said, but I just want to put it, Community Board 2 is a mixed use neighborhood, just like Community Board 1. CB2 is the highest density of liquor licenses, sidewalk cafes, and destination eating and drinking establishments in New York City. And while we appreciate the DOT's response to our long list of questions, we cannot, how can we even consider a zoning text amendment without any rules and regulations for sidewalk cafes and roadbed dining? The questions were responsive, but they are filled with things like it's under development, citing requirements are forthcoming. It's like, trust us. And this is not realistic in terms of how the world works. I know all the other chairs have hit on this issue. I'm just saying that how do you expect people to approve or reject a zoning amendment without any details about how it will be implemented? Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen Brown, followed by Russell Squire.
And I'm going to be very brief and just say that I'm in line and agree with the other statements that were made. I do want to comment that like all, I think most of the community boards here is that we very much support our restaurants, and the process itself, I think we support from simplifying the process itself. But I think the concerns that were spoke about, we share as well, and it's in our own resolution. I did want to point out that it's nice to hear a really strong, at least affirmation and confirmation that community boards will be involved in the process, and a declarative statement that was not given at our presentation. It was a maybe, and our particular vote was actually very close, and it may have made a difference. But again, I'll just confirm what other people say, that we would like to have heard much more details before confirming the entire process. Thank you.
Russell.
If I
Thank
might
you.
just add,
Yes.
Thanks.
Carolyn?
I don't want to slow everyone down.
So I think a number of the concerns that have been raised, I think, are valid, and there's questions about what the details ultimately of this sort of DOT component of permanent open restaurants are going to be. But we voted to approve in CB8 the zoning text amendment, because the zoning text amendment component of this specifically is actually very narrow. So that's really the point that I want to make, which is if you take COVID out of it and you go to the pre-COVID existing sidewalk cafe program, that's a thing that we're all very familiar with. And there were zoning restrictions on where sidewalk cafes were allowed to operate. The only thing that this zoning text amendment specifically does is it says that any restaurant located anywhere is now allowed to operate a sidewalk cafe as opposed to having it be restricted to only certain areas of certain blocks and that kind of thing. So it doesn't really get into any of the details of what the ultimate parameters of the program are going to be. And it may be that folks have concerns about maybe people have sections of blocks that they think there shouldn't be sidewalk cafes, allowed on until we know what the parameters of the program are. But I just, the point I want to make is that it's actually a very, very narrow change. And it's just to say that instead of only certain restaurants being allowed to have sidewalk cafes, which is how it used to be, now every restaurant will be permitted to have a sidewalk cafe. There's not going to be these location things. So because it's, this aspect of it, what we're actually voting on today is pretty narrow, and we approved it.
Thank you. Cecily Harris, followed by Xavier Santiago. Cecily.
Good morning, everyone, and I just want to thank everyone for this presentation. So our board decided to vote against this because, and I hate to piggyback because I hate to be a piggybacker, but I have to agree with all my fellow chairs that to make a permanent change in the midst of an emergency just seems like it's not a logical thing. Within an environment that is just constantly changing, where we're getting all this new knowledge and advice and pathways, to then try to make a permanent change in an environment that is subject to constant change, I think is premature. These conversations that we're having right now should have started months ago, and they need to continue because it's important that the community who is servicing and going to these restaurants is involved in the process that makes something like this permanent. To then go ahead and leave the community out and say, hey, this is what we come up with, but not even to say, hey, this is what we come up with, because nothing has been said and there is no plan laid out that we can actually vote on. And so with that, we are hesitant to say that we approve this. We do think that this is an excellent opportunity to increase the participation of the restaurants and allow them to be a part of the Open Restaurants Initiative, but the community board still needs to play a part in it. I'm excited that it will be something similar to the Sidewalk Cafe, but I think we are also doing our businesses and our restaurants a disservice because they are constantly having to put up and tear down things that don't fit a code that has not been laid out. So they are spending money on these structures and don't really know if they're going to be up to code. So I think it's important that we allow, this to kind of play out a little bit, have these conversations before we go into something that is more permanent. And just let me say for our area, with the pandemic, we have seen, we've always talked about the pandemic has been a microscope on things that have always plagued us, but have not been dealt with. Sanitation is a real issue for us. And we have seen increased rodents, increased rats, increased just trash all over the place. And it hasn't been picked up. So in that way, we're asking for a comprehensive plan from all of the agencies involved, be it DOT, be it sanitation, be it DCP. There needs to be a comprehensive plan where everybody has a role of enforcement and that they know their role and are ready to do that. So that is why we voted against it. But thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you. Xavier?
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you for the presentation. I think our community board has had two committees weigh in on this. We have not had our full board, so an official position has not been met, but what I will register and then ask a series of questions is that people have expressed their concerns as our fellow community board members and chairs here of sanitation, enforcement. One of the larger issues that was raised within our community, and I think this is extremely important for Upper Manhattan, is that we have a reverse commute culture where people park and then drive out of the city to go to work and then come back in. And there have been a series of complaints that have been fielded since the pandemic began about the loss of parking. Now, then on top of that, we've had a loss of enforcement with both Department of Sanitation, NYPD, Department of Transportation, when it comes to how everything is being managed. And there are concerns that if these are made permanent, and we are supportive, let me caveat that we are very supportive of our local businesses, and it was a lifeline allowing this exemption after we in the first couple of months had lost over 40 plus restaurants, businesses permanently closed. However, I think one of the concerns, and I ask this, is, in adding this text amendment and saying, okay, this agency is going to be enforcing it. Do they even have the capacity right now to enforce it? Or are we looking, what is the runway to have that occur, to hire, train, and get people out there? Right now, at this current junction, we don't have enforcement on cleanup, refuse, trash. Again, these are supposed to be commercially handled, not part of the city. They hire private companies to haul away the trash, and that doesn't always happen, which leads to the rodent problems, et cetera, and so on. And then so my first question is, how will enforcement really take place when there's none currently happening? That's the first question. And what do we do for communities such as ours that have a car culture that is necessary so they can maintain their employment, but yet then they come into the city, they can't find parking anymore? And the reason I ask that is because we also, if you look down Lexington corridor on 125th, all the way down to about 100th Street, it gets jammed up to one lane. And part of that is because delivery trucks no longer have a place to pull over and offload their goods. So first question, headcount for enforcement, how will that be handled, and the runway for that? And then how do we handle the lost parking spots?
I'll turn that over to DOT, but I just want to clarify again, just to make sure that we're all still, so on the same page, that the text amendment does not affect roadway. So there's no effect on the parking. The questions about how parking are not germane specifically to the action of the zoning text amendment. The zoning text amendment's entire effect is really about allowing more restaurants than were prior to COVID allowed to participate in the sidewalk cafe program to participate. So that's the only effect of that. It's also actually not changing the authority, moving DCWP authority for sidewalk cafe administration to DOT. That has to happen through legislation actions as well. And all of the roadway actions have to happen through legislation action. So just wanted to continue to clarify that point. Jennifer, do you want to speak about enforcement?
Sure. Thank you for the question. DOT did receive appropriate funding in the mayor's budget to increase and ramp up the headcount. We are looking to start an open restaurants program unit. We will have dedicated enforcement teams. So that is different than the current emergency program. And we're looking forward to sharing more of that information when we have that available. And I wanted to see if that addressed your question or if there was a follow-up.
It does, but again, the lead time, what is your runway to having this happen? Because again, we're on the ground and we're taking the criticism from the constituents. And I think a lot of them feel, and I use the word feel versus, because they feel like they are not being considered in this process, especially in this neighborhood. So I think that's how long until enforcement would actually be taking place.
Understood. So for any particular issues that are coming up with existing open restaurant setups, we do have our inspection unit that is going out and visiting the current participating restaurants in OR. So please, we've been working with several of your boards and staff to address existing issues. So please send those over to DOT and we can have our enforcement unit take a closer look. In terms of rodents and sanitation, issues that were brought up in previous questions as well, ponding issues, those are also issues that DOT can have conversations with other agencies to try to address. And so just again, continue to send those over to DOT.
I'll just also say we are actively in conversations with Department of Health. They have issued guidance to restaurants, specifically looking at how to clean the areas. And obviously they do hold any evidence of rodents as part of their inspection process. However, there is a clear difference, between a roadway setup that is essentially non-compliant and is built into the roadway, and thus very difficult to clean underneath, versus one where a platform can be lifted and cleaned routinely, right? So how do we get to a world where we don't have a lot of these shacks in the street and instead get to the world that Jackie showed on slides where there is the more formal removable setup? That's the entire point of creating the new permanent program and really getting to a place where there's site review again and official licensure by an agency.
Okay. Tammy, followed by Lowell.
I have three things. First of all, there was a lot of large discussion about issues that we have on sidewalks because DOT does not look at the difference in sidewalk construction or sidewalk material. So for example, because we have so much historic, our sidewalks include things like cobblestones in places, the old Tribeca sidewalks, and all of that are included in the dialogue and conversation of space. However, if you have accessibility issues, that clear path is included with cobblestones, which actually doesn't work for people in wheelchairs or the double strollers or things like that. So the materiality, which is so important to understand on a local basis, is completely ignored in this text amendment. I don't know, and again, this goes back to well, we'd have to look at it then, but that locality for zoning is completely wiped away by this. And I look forward to hearing what your suggestions are for understanding that, because we go from sidewalks that are not functionally usable, but yet they would qualify under the program that we had. There were plenty of people who set up sidewalk cafes on our narrow sidewalks or street bed, and there is not enough clear path. And you are talking about handicapped, and I know that's not the right word, mobility challenged or whatever it is, to try and get over. I'm just so frustrated by this whole dialogue. The glass old parts of the sidewalks in Tribeca, the cobblestones, it's just not been great. So I want to understand what is currently written in this zoning text amendment to take care of that, because it wasn't taken care of. One. Two, why, when the city is talking about climate change and everything that's so important to take a look at that, why this zoning text amendment prioritizes restaurants over the greening of the streets. So we had a unique opportunity here to take a look at this and say, you know what, we could, on sidewalks, we can take a look and put temporary, we could put other types of retail. There should multi-layered approaches, maybe performance art, maybe street art on our sidewalks, more greening of our sidewalks. None of that is actually included, which are some of the things that made the city so much more valuable with the less traffic, was the ability to have so much more outdoor activity, but none of that's included in here. In fact, it seems to be that through this text amendment, you're actually crowding the streets further, which is a direct economic value to the restaurant owner and to the real estate owner of the particular properties. But there also isn't anything that came with this, like a small business improvement zone. That, there's nothing that if I'm a large conglomerate, I have the same exact as an independent restaurant, which the independents were the ones we were desperately trying to save through the pandemic, who didn't have this financial base that the chains did. And that's what we saw. I mean, we lost hundreds of small shops in Lower Manhattan. This does not actually fix that. And there's no layering on any of it. So will that be included in a program anywhere for biz dev, for small businesses, or improvement zones? Will there be any layering looking forward? What has DCP, because DOT looked at in terms of having zones that would be art instead of retail, or more greenery, or other uses of public realm?
Okay, I think I heard three questions. So I think the first one was about the cobblestones and about how design and clear path work. And as far as we're actually having a back chat about it. As far as I know, the current sidewalk cafe rules that are embodied in actually, let me step back and say, It is true, the text amendment says nothing about cobblestones or clear path, because the role of zoning is that it defines where in the city cafes can exist, and there are no rules about the siting criteria all in zoning. Those exist in the administrative code under DCWP. So zoning is totally mute to those issues. Those laws exist in a different body of law. We are not changing those at this time. Though we intend, and we sort of mentioned that there's some interest in changing them in very modest ways. We talked about diagrams, we talked about city bike distances. So issues about how the clear path functions would be changes to that administrative code law, potentially, after that the responsibility for that part of the administrative code is moved from one agency to another.
And
I don't
wait, because you're asking us to vote to say yes to this, and you're telling us that the rules will change later as it moves from one agency to the other, right? What role of public input goes with those rule changes, or is that all internal?
No, any change to the city's administrative code is controlled by the city council and legislation. And the city council charges agencies to develop the rules of different programs. So in the case of the Sidewalk Cafe, the current law under the administrative code says that the Department of Consumer Worker Protection promulgates the rules of the program. And presumably that, authority would move to a different agency. So what happens when rules are changes? There's a citywide administrative procedure for rule changes. There's public review associated with that. There's noticing public hearings and ultimate review by the agency. So it's not a ULURP action. That's not our choice. That's the way that the legal structures work, but that's not part of zoning. So we don't have anything to change for you there. So going specifically back to the question about the cobblestones, I don't believe that the existing rules refer to cobblestones, but I do believe that under the ADA requirements that the surface condition is considered. So we want to take a little bit of a look at that, and we'd be happy to talk to you, more in the future. But I think what you're describing is effectively controlled under the existing rules, because the condition of and passability of the sidewalk is part of being ADA compliant.
You understand,
which is already part of the rules.
But you understand that you're telling us as a public realm that we should vote to approve to something that you will be changing the rules on later, that do not come back to the community board for input. They go to city council. There's administrative changes. There's all kinds of changes that will happen behind the scenes. And please understand when I say this, it goes to a community board perspective of you approve a building with the hope that you are told that it will have affordable housing and it will be a mixed use development, only to come back and have an administrative code change within the city, and it's a full commercial building, which we have all experienced, right? So I'm struggling.
I obviously hear many of the substantive comments on this procedure issue. Again, I would just say there is an existing body of law on sidewalk cafes. We are telling you that there are certain places where we've observed that there are potential updates that can make the program that has existed for a long time better, and that those might go through public review in the future. They are separate and apart legally from the question of where we're going to have cafes. So it is certainly the ability of a community board to say, we shouldn't update the sidewalk cafe program. We should leave it as is, and that any of those future changes that we think might make the program more beneficial shouldn't change, that we should live with the exact sidewalk cafe program we have, which is, again, if the sidewalk text amendment passed and no other legislative changes in the future passed, then that is what we would have. We would have the old program as administered by the old agency under the old rules.
And my other questions about public realm and public use.
So let's go back to them. So I think there was a question about other users on the street. Which I actually think is really exciting. I think an underreported program that I think DOT would be happy to talk about is open storefronts, where the ability to use the frontage outside of your business for other types of users has been out there. It's been much less successful and robustly used, primarily because I think other kinds of businesses don't rely or necessarily have as as much purpose for their outdoor space as a restaurant does. That being said, I've seen I've seen good examples of a few retailers doing that. But again, it's not been a particularly well-used program. I think if communities have interest in seeing other kinds of use outside, certainly open streets is something that is continuing through the city. So actually, let me turn this over to DOT to just say, because I think from our perspective, we are changing one limited program that exists under restaurants, but that is not to say that the city, that this is the only way in which the city is reimagining the use of its streets.
Thanks, Carolyn, and thanks, Tammy, for the questions and comments. I do want to note that the open restaurant presentations that DOT and DCP have been giving over the spring and summer and now through the fall also coincide with the outreach that DOT has been completing on the NYC Streets Plan. So also tasked by City Council to provide a 5-year transportation plan that will continue to improve the safety, accessibility, and quality of city streets. We have been working on our recommendations for the final plan, which is due to the council at the end of this year. We've held the first round of virtual workshops over the summer, and we're hosting our second round next month, where we're gathering feedback and input from community stakeholders to see exactly what needs there are in each of the neighborhoods and districts. So this is something that we are reviewing in tandem with all of the feedback here that we're hearing throughout our open restaurants outreach.
Tammy, did all your questions get answered?
Unfortunately, no, but I don't think that there are answers to the questions I'm asking. So it's all of the wait and see.
Okay, Lowell?
Yeah, to what Rosie, to what you were just saying to Tammy, there are no answers to a lot of these questions, and that's the problem. There are a lot of issues being brought up by members of the public in the chat, and there have been a lot of issues raised that are bigger than just this zoning text amendment, to which there are no answers. So I'm going to stay very focused just on the zoning text amendment. Carolyn, you have not explained to us why we need to remove this zoning, why we have to pass this zoning text amendment when you keep telling us that, well, all the sidewalk cafe rules are still in place, the administrative code is still there, just eliminate the zoning. Why do we need to do this? You haven't answered that question. The answer is because we're doing this backwards, and we should not be eliminating the zoning text amendment. We should not be eliminating this zoning regulation by this zoning text amendment until we have the answers to all of the other questions that the people in the chat and Tammy were just asking. If the sidewalk cafe regulations are still in place, leave the zoning in place until we have a complete answer, and we shouldn't be doing this piecemeal. Now, Rosie, what I mentioned this earlier, right now, the board resolution, the borough board resolution is a deny unless. Can I make a motion that we make this an outright denial?
I
second that.
Okay, I will turn that to our land use director
Lizette?
and our general counsel.
Yeah, it's really what the borough board decides. Our thinking in including conditions is always that it's more meaningful to give some input on how an application can be approved. So that is what we sought to do. We read through the resolutions that have been passed by community boards, and we also took very diligent notes on those boards that have had deliberations but have not voted yet. So I think that was our intent, is to provide some comment on how this could be improved, even if it were to not go through as a text amendment at this point. But as I mentioned at the beginning, it's really up to the borough board. Adele, I don't know if there's any procedural or issues.
No, I believe the board can do what it wants, but you might want to take account of how the full boards have authorized you guys to vote on this. And Because they were looking at one thing and you can change it, but you know, you
Right,
just might want to take
Adele,
another.
Adele, that's my issue, is that my board voted to deny this unanimously. And I don't
Mhm.
know that I can support a deny unless, but I don't want a no vote on this resolution to be seen as that I'm supporting this. So
Right.
that's why I'm asking, and to Lizette, to your point, I think we can still keep all the caveats in there, but we can say we want to deny this because the following points have not been addressed, and we still get the message across, but then we just have an outright denial.
But I
So
think there might be
I-
people, Lowell, whose boards have approved them voting
Understood.
approve unless, you know, that's why you might want to take a little head count.
Understood, Adele, but that's why I'm raising it. And if I
Yeah,
raise it
yeah.
as a motion to change it, we can vote on that motion on whether it should be a deny or a deny unless before we get to the final vote on the borough board resolution. And then we can get a sense of, you know, what boards can do, you know, are in favor of outright denial. The sense I got listening to my fellow chairs is that there would be sufficient room here for an outright denial, but you know, that's why I raise it as a motion to see where we are.
And
So
can I
You
ask,
can do it, whatever you
So
choose to do.
can't
there's
we
been a
do,
motion, I'm sorry, there's been a motion and a second. So then, I guess I should call the question.
Just a
Um,
point of information. I just want to clarify, is it a substitute motion or is the motion a question of whether to do a substitute motion?
The motion is to change this from deny to deny, from deny unless to deny.
Okay, so to me, that's, yes, it sounds like it's a
if
substitute.
And I don't
motion.
care which way it goes. I'm just trying to get a sense of where the boards are. I know what my board wants me to do, but I don't have a sense of where the votes were on the various boards. So this was a way to address it, Russell.
and then I have a question that about what Lowell's motion. I put it in the chat. Is it instead of a no unless, is it possible to have it be a no because? And I think that was unanswered in this dialogue. And a clarification, Lowell, if that's what you're asking, is a flat no because versus a no unless.
Yes,
Tell you
that's what I'm asking for, Tammy.
So what community board wants to do is to say a no with conditions. What community board is saying is, okay, we don't agree with this resolution, but let's start a pilot program that can monitor it, that can come up with the right answers and the right solutions to address what we're trying to accomplish here. That's what we're fighting for.
okay, let's keep this to Low. Any questions regarding Lowell's proposed motion? Stephen, Eleazar, do you have a question? or
I'm just going to
clarif-
make a statement because he asked for it, and I will say that CB7 is prepared to deny with conditions, but we would not just outright deny. He asked for that feedback, and we would vote against the outright deny, but would support the deny with conditions.
Eleazar, did you?
Yeah, he just said the same things I was gonna say, that we want to say no with conditions, or deny with conditions.
Barry?
Yeah, our board voted to approve with conditions, and I think that gets us close enough to deny with most of the same conditions that I feel comfortable doing that, but I wouldn't want an outright deny.
All right, call the question then, Rosie. I mean, I don't care which way this goes. I'm just wanting to get a sense of where we are.
First, Russell has his hand up, so I'm just gonna, Russell, you want to say something?
It sounded like it was a sort of straw poll. So I mean, I would vote no on regardless of which one it is because we voted to approve.
So I'm gonna call the question on Lowell's motion and Janine's second to change the resolution to deny or deny because instead of a deny unless CB1.
Come back to me.
Okay, CB2.
Yes.
CB4.
Yes.
CB6.
CB6 voted to approve, so we have to say no on this motion.
CB7.
No.
CB8.
I mean, so this is, sorry, this is voting on whether to change the motion, not voting on a substitute motion, in which case I would, I mean, I would vote no on the substitute motion, but on this question, I guess I'm going to abstain.
CB9,
No.
CB10,
Yes.
CB11.
Abstain. Abstain.
Thank you, Nilsa. Got you. Eleazar,
Yes.
CB1,
Yes.
I'm going to change my vote to no. Sorry.
This and this is voting on Lowell's motion to change it to a no, what we called no because versus a no unless. Yep.
okay. So
I'm sorry, I have a procedural question just for my information. Are the council members or other members of the Borough Board eligible also to vote on this motion?
yes, they would have to vote on this motion, and so that's what I'm counting. We would need 3 other people to vote, whichever way they vote. That would be the borough president. I believe Helen Rosenthal is still on, and we would need 1 other person. So I would have to see who I can get on the call now. Borough president? Oh, she's on another call. Helen Rose.
Is it possible to continue with the discussion until the other council members come on?
Yes, we're gonna get a few of them on at 10:30 when we're having the first vote. So what I could do is leave this vote open on this motion.
Rosie,
And
the only issue I have on leaving this open right now, and I don't know procedurally if there's an option, but the council members who are going to come in did not get the benefit of this discussion or hear why why I even made this motion. So I mean, that's the problem with letting the council members show up to vote without actually attending the rest of the meeting, but that's a different issue.
Are some on? I think, is Councilmember Rosenthal on or someone else on?
Helen Rosenthal was listening in. Helen?
I don't want to, I'm voting, oh, sorry. Sorry, multi-voting. I vote no. I've been listening to the discussion. I vote no.
It's Gail Brewer. I'm voting no also.
Can I just confirm, Rosie, that you heard Russell change his vote? Because I know you were multitasking and sometimes, Russell, I think you just make sure that.
I got it changed. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I did. We're still missing 1 more vote in order for this motion to pass or fail. Right now, this motion is not passing, but I still need 1 more person to make this official. Helen, can you notice any of the other Manhattan council members that might be there that might be able to join?
Sure. Oh, Diana. Okay, hang on.
So once we get through this motion, we're gonna go to public testimony. And then at 10:30, I know some people have a hard stop and I will do the first round of voting. I know as we're waiting to get another council member on to vote, CB4, 7, 10, 11, and 12 have to leave around 10:30. So I'll call on those boards first to vote. And I'll call the other boards as a matter of procedure, and then you could pass and vote later. And then we will continue with public testimony. And then we'll leave the vote open, and then at 11:30, we'll do the remainder of the voting members on whatever resolution gets approved going forward after this motion. Barry, you have your hand up.
Yes, and I don't know where we are procedurally since we have a vote open. But I was just going to say that the resolution as written, the unless conditions, one of the conditions that our community board had and that I think is really important is for the ability for DOT to revoke approval of outdoor dining setups, whether they be sidewalk cafes or roadbed dining, in the event that the applicant,
Barry,
the eatery.
Barry, I'm going to stop you for a second because I see Diana Ayala on. Diana did. So Diana, let me just. I'm sure Helen brought you up to speed a little bit. Right now, there is a motion that was sent to all the voting members of the Borough Board, including yourself, that was a no with conditions. There is currently a motion to change the resolution to a no because, just a straightforward no. Do you vote yes to change the resolution, or do you vote no for the resolution to remain the same?
I vote no.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The resolution fails. The resolution that will be considered by all is a no because. Thank you very much, Councilwoman. Okay, Barry.
Rosie, just to clarify, the resolution that's going to be considered is a no unless, right?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, you said no because, so I was just confirming that. So as I was saying, I think that one of the conditions that we should have, one of the unless conditions should be that DOT, has a process in its rules to revoke approval for a sidewalk cafe or a roadbed dining in the event that, an applicant or an eatery, demonstrates, willful noncompliance with noise, sanitation, or safety records, similar to, in some ways, what the SLA does when it deals with liquor licenses. I think that this has a similar impact on, the quality of life for people in the surrounding community. And I think that having an enforcement mechanism that can result in a revocation of an outdoor dining permit, whether it's for a sidewalk cafe or roadbed dining, is something that should be a condition for this Borough Board reso.
Thank you for that, Barry. I just want to, we're certainly going to do what we've done with past zoning text amendment resolutions and put it up on the screen and make sure that we're incorporating anything that's come up in discussions and anything else that the members want to bring up. I just want to make sure that we do that at the right moment. So Rosie, I don't know if we're doing testimony first or if we want to take a look at the resolution at this point.
Hold on. I think there were some questions in the Q&A and in the chat that maybe we should get DOT or DCP to answer. April, can you help me? I will go to the Q&A and can you go through the chat? In the Q&A, there is a question from Alan Oster from CB4. Are the elevator railways inspected above the seating areas?
Sure. So this will be the first time that there are licensed sidewalk cafes in the elevated areas. In general, the elevated structures themselves, they're typically state-owned structures. There may be some that are city-owned, but when they're state-owned, like the rail lines themselves or the state highways, those are typically inspected by the state for safety, right? So there have been many issues in the city about making sure that those don't have any debris falling off of them. That is a state responsibility. Separate and apart, I think we've heard, that there may be conditions about dust or debris that are particular to a restaurant under an elevated area. And I would say we haven't gotten any actual complaints about restaurants that have experienced that, but I know this question has come up at a few community boards. So I think, from the health department's perspective, that is covered under their general rules of cleanliness. But if there are specific rules about the interaction between something under an elevated and the cafe, I think we're sort of open to hearing what that would look like. So I guess the short answer is no, that the city does not inspect, assets, elevated assets that aren't, under its purview. But if there is an issue about cleanliness or interaction, I think we're still trying to understand what the specific issue is that would relate to having additional rules in the application or something. I think we're interested to hear more about that.
Someone is describing a situation where they live, and the question is, what is DOT currently doing about, because there's no enforcement on open container law or the Smoke Free Air Act?
So first, I want to confirm, I believe that Jennifer Santinez had to step out for a moment. So we may not have a DOT response at this juncture. I can certainly say that unlike the previous DCWP program, open restaurants does have a no smoking requirement. That's something that I think the health department has been very strong on. And sorry, and the other question, there was about outdoor air, and then what was the first one?
Open container law.
Oh, open container law. Well, the open container law is state law. There has been administrative coordination with state liquor authority to make sure that the state changes have been part of the open restaurants program, and those laws have been extended for an additional year. I think there is still open work about how those laws may change in perpetuity, but again, those are state laws. So the work that's happening on the city side is coordination to ensure that the program that the city is administering works with those state laws, not to not to change the state laws.
What about enforcement?
I'm not sure what the specific question is.
Currently, if you call NYPD, NYPD does not come because it is a DOT program. You can file a complaint for noise, but you can file many complaints to 311, but there is no enforcement, there is no follow-up, and there's no repeat back to the customer. So how will this improve that?
So let me just expand on that, because during this temporary program, what we have heard here at Borough Board and at Borough Service Cabinet has been the lack of enforcement and the trouble getting the right enforcement agency, and that it gets bounced from DOT to DOB to NYPD to the marshal's office, and that at the end, nothing or very little gets enforced. And some people have found some success with the marshal's office. So now that it's, the proposal is to make this a permanent program, how is enforcement going to work in the future?
Sure, and I am actually told that Jennifer has popped back in. So Jennifer, please go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Carolyn. And Rosie, thank you for the clarification. Tammy, thanks for the question. In terms of enforcement, DOT inspectors do handle inspecting for compliance of the actual setups and clearances on the sidewalk, as well as accessibility and meeting of the siting criteria. We do work closely with the precincts on trying to handle any other type of loitering on the street. If there are, I think just looking at the Q&A, if that person could just drop in the block in which they're seeing some of these particular issues, that will be something that we'll send to our enforcement unit as well as alert the local precinct. Amplified sound and noise issues, of course, should be sent in as complaints to 311. There's no amplified sound that is allowed in the existing current program. That's also to be anticipated for the permanent program. And we can work with DEP, our colleagues there, to further address.
Okay, so we really need to move on to the public testimony because in about 15 minutes, we need to stop to do the first round of voting. Janine,
I have a quick question.
Yes, go ahead.
I understand that people have time constraints, but for people who can be flexible, I would love to have a time later today, post public testimony, where people can log their votes, even if it's just dialing into a number. I'm not sure procedurally how you do that, but we have 80 attendees. I don't know how many plan to speak, just dropped to 79. But I feel that it's unfair for us to vote without hearing what their testimony. Thank you.
Is Adele still on the call? No.
I mean, can't we call the question at any time? It's a privileged motion. If anybody calls the question, we would have to vote on it. If we voted to call the question, we would have to vote right there. I mean, I don't know if that vote would pass, but that's, I mean, I think procedurally under Robert's rules, that's how it would work.
I think we can vote. I think the issue is that some people want to hear testimony. I think we should try to hear as many people as we can moving forward. And then, some people are going to need to vote, and then we can keep the vote open for a while. I don't know that we can do it all day because we won't.
Yeah, I don't know if we need to have quorum in the room when we're, if we're doing it later in the day, do we need to have quorum present in order to end the meeting and to get those last votes in? I believe we would. So Janine, I'm gonna reach out to Adele while we start with public testimony. April, if you could call the first 5 people. There's a minute and a half for every person who wants to give public testimony. April, can you call the first 5 people?
Yes. Please use the raise hand function to show that you want to go ahead and testify. I believe to raise your hand if you're over the phone is *9. And to unmute it is *6. Okay, let me see here. Actually, Louisa, I can't see the raised hands actually. Oh wait, here we go. I see.
They're in the attendees and I see
it. Yes, I see Sarah Takesh, Kyle Sklevrov, Catherine Quinn, Emma Colbert, and Robert Graff. Go ahead, Sarah. You have a minute and a half. Sarah, it looks like you're muted.
Apologize. I wanted to show my face to show that I'm not like an older person. Well, I guess you guys can't see my face, so I'm just gonna have to speak in audio. I'm a middle-aged. I love the outdoors. I love all of the activity in life that's come about from all of this. I enjoy many aspects of it. I am beyond belief horrified at what it's going to do to the neighborhood long term. This should only remain a temporary solution for the next year or so until we have more answers. You guys are going to literally transform and wreck our neighborhood. I'm speaking from CB2 from the West Village. This is uniquely affecting the West Village in a way that it may not be affecting other areas where the streets are broader, where there's fewer concentration of restaurants. It is a filth insanity show here. There is rats. I run over rats. My dog is licking rat corpses every 5 minutes. I run over them on my bicycle. These restaurants are holding us hostage. There's these thugs on a restaurant down the street. And I know that the open streets, which is actually closed streets policy, is a separate matter from this forum, but that is intertwined with this. And it is a horror show. I'm a single parent. I cannot access my front door. I cannot access things. I have a lot of trouble now physically dealing with my situation because of this, because of these closed streets. And the noise, the filth, the urination, the vomiting, the rats, the homeless people, the crackheads. You will shave off 20% off the value of my house. And the class of people that will start to pour into this neighborhood, if they ever want to buy my house, will be a completely different type of crowd, if at all. You have destroyed the property values of everybody's homes in our neighborhood by doing this. And I actually find it lively and enjoyable to be here. But this is not working, folks. This is not working for us. You will not be able to enforce this. Nobody ever comes to enforce anything and never will, because there are 10 to 20 times the number of restaurants that there were before a program like this.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Kyle Sklevra. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your last name. And after Kyle is Catherine Quinn.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much for hosting this. So my wife and I live in the West Village on Perry Street in a tiny, 400 square foot apartment where all of our windows face the street. We are on the ground floor. I do not believe the city has taken into account ground floor residents and their quality of life when considering this. We now have 30 people dining literally feet from our bedroom and living room window endlessly. There's just endless incessant noise. We can't relax in peace. We can't go to sleep in quiet. This used to be a quiet residential neighborhood with, restaurants where people went indoors, and it was a residential neighborhood. And now, we're being forced out of our home. We were never, consulted on this. And honestly, we supported, restaurants in our local business during the pandemic, but to now feel like the residents who live in this community don't matter compared to the business interests is very alarming. We have, people literally sitting feet from our window, banging dishes, laughing, drinking, partying. And I get that that's part of going to a restaurant, but that should be kept inside and literally prying eyes. If we open our curtains or windows for fresh air, we have people looking in. So please take into account ground floor residences on small residential streets in the village. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Next up, we have Catherine Quinn, and after Catherine, we have Emma Colbert.
Thank you. I am a member of the West Village Residents Association. I find one of the most egregious, hostile aspects of the proposed zoning text amendment has to do with the change in Article 3, 32411, and Article 5, 5234, which provides that all restaurants, even in completely residential neighborhoods, may have fully open facades for to 10 o'clock at night. 11 o'clock at night on weekdays and 1 on weekends. This seems to be directed to drive residents out of our neighborhoods. No one can live and sleep with a bar beneath them, totally open and spewing on the street. Also, Section Article 5, 5234 gets rid of the prohibition in commercial uses in residential districts from only serving seated customers. So it also provides that a mob can stand and drink outside a fully open facade under my bedroom windows. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Next, we have Emma and then Robert Graff.
Good morning. My name is Emma Colbert. I am the president of the Space Block Association, which is on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. I'm going to read the letter that I submitted for comments. While open restaurants was instituted in June 2020, there was still the long, hard winter and spring which followed. Communities in New York City have only recently begun to feel the full impact of open streets in the last few months. The Space Block Association has worked diligently alongside other members of the community for the past 15 years to ensure the ability to maintain a positive and healthy quality of life for those who live in our neighborhood. Despite our community's rapid transformation from a relatively quiet neighborhood to a destination hotspot, we've managed to maintain a positive balance with incoming food and beverage establishments. We've achieved this through exhaustive meetings, negotiations, and extensive due diligence. Our neighborhood consists mainly of tenement and other small buildings. The establishment of the open restaurants program has created excessive noise, smoke, and congested streets. On a regular basis, our homes fill with cigarette and marijuana smoke, and the noise from the street fills the air. The Space Block Association supports and wants the best for our restaurants and bars while maintaining and preserving our legally protected right to a decent quality of life. According to the Smoke-Free Air Act, the law prohibits smoking and the use of electronic cigarettes in most workplaces and public spaces. This includes areas near hospitals, parks, beaches, pedestrian plazas. Open Restaurants has turned the space directly below our windows
Thank you,
in the
Emma.
storefronts of non-food and beverage businesses into pedestrian plazas.
Thank you very much, Emma. Next, we have Robert Graff and then Andrea Meyer.
After Robert, we will start our first round of voting.
Good afternoon. I'm Robert Graff. Good morning. I'm Robert Graff. I'm also president of the First Street Block Association. We're on First Street between First and Second Avenue and Community Board 3. I'm here to speak against the zoning text amendment and the plan for making open restaurants permanent. We're against them mainly because here on the Lower East Side, the issues of noise, hours, and rats are huge problems. Regarding the noise on Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, hundreds of young people all over my neighborhood start drinking outside at open restaurants. Some restaurants actually serve good food, but most of it is bar fare meant to be chased by alcohol. By 10 o'clock, everybody's getting drunk, yelling and screaming, and they're outside under our windows. They're not inside a cafe where they have to be quiet. They're outside yelling, and the sky's the limit. There's no reasonable peace for us in our apartments on these nights, and we've come to dread them. Then there's the hours. It was hard enough when open restaurants was open till 11 o'clock. But then New York City said, stay outside and stay out late. Now it's outdoor yelling and outdoor crowds till 4 a.m. For many people and their families, sleep is often impossible. At our July CB3 meeting, over 100 people complained of lost sleep from noise under their windows. And then there's the rats. They're breeding and feeding under the garbage-strewn ticky-tacky plywood sheds. They're coming out earlier and they're all over our street and the children's park. Now there's a thing called the social contract. By one definition, it's an implicit agreement among the members of society to cooperate for social benefits. And it's a pillar of Western democratic government. I believe that open restaurants and zoning text amendment violates the social contract by imposing.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you very much, Robert.
You're welcome.
Rosie, did you say we're moving to vote? Oh, you're on mute, Rosie.
Thank you. I'm going to be calling on some people because I know they have to be off soon. CB4.
I will vote in favor of the resolution as it's written, but I would prefer. Rosie, actually, can I ask you something? Somebody, I think Tammy had said something about amending the list of conditions.
That was me, yeah.
Or Barry said it. Are we going to do that? Because I'd like to see what the list of conditions are. I mean, I'm going to vote in favor of this, but I want to beef up the list of conditions if that's possible.
I also put in the chat that I would like to strengthen the language so it's a little stronger based on the dialogue and the public feedback.
Michael Lisette, changes are being made to the document. Is that correct?
Yes, this is Michael from the Borough President's Office. Once we get to that point, Rosie, I can put the document on the screen and we can propose changes.
And just to go back to just to go back to Janine's question, people would have to vote now. Otherwise, we would need to set up another Zoom call and get 13 people in the room. I would need to have quorum to have people vote later on in the day.
Because you're asking me to vote now on a resolution that's going to change.
Well, the other thing I can do, Lowell, is I know you have somewhere to be, but the other vote will be taking place around 11:30 or so. And by that point, we should have whatever other changes are going to be made to the resolution.
All right, can I log off and then log back on at 11:25 to vote?
Absolutely, and I can text you when that other vote is going to get
All right,
on.
if you could do that, I'm not gonna vote. I'm gonna wait till 11:30 to vote, then I'll log back on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So you pass for now. Stephen,
I'm voting for, I'm voting yes.
Cecily,
I'm sorry, Rosie, are we doing amendments or are we?
some people have a hard stop and they said they wanted to get their vote in. So I'm going to call on them and the council members some of them are joining us now. Then we're going to go back to public testimony and then we're going to read the changes to the resolution and have another vote. And I'm going to keep the vote open and then we will call those people who have not voted yet, which Lowell will get off and then come back on later after he knows what the changes are. I believe we may have lost Cecily for a little bit. Nilsa.
CB 11 has not voted on this, so I abstain.
Eleazar.
Yeah, we voted to oppose this resolution.
So the resolution is a no because.
Exactly,
a
no because. No
a
because.
no with
yeah.
conditions, excuse me, a no
Exactly.
with conditions.
Yeah, as I said in the beginning.
So you vote in favor of the resolution?
We voted no with conditions.
Okay, so that's a yes. Okay, great.
Rosie, this is Cicely. I apologize. I was on mute.
Yes.
So we're voting
Cecily,
yes.
You're voting yes. Thank you, Cecily.
A no with conditions. Yes, we voted yes.
Okay. Gail, do you want to vote now or will you come on later? Is she still on? Oh, I think she had to leave.
Yeah, she'll be on. She'll be back on at 11.
I just need to do a couple of texts to make sure. I am waiting for Councilmember Idanis Rodriguez, Councilmember Kalos was on mute voting in another meeting, and Councilmember Powers.
Would you like me to move forward with our public testimonies?
Vicky is in attendance from Community Board 5. She's joined the call. Vicky, I know were unable to join us later. Are you prepared to vote now?
I don't see Vicky unless she's on the phone. And if she is, she can use *9 to raise her hand.
She is prepared to vote in favor, but I need to get it in the record. Lafferty, if you can get her, we can unmute her. I don't know. She's on as an attendee. Does that mean she needs to be elevated?
No, she's not in the attendees list. She's not on. Unless she's on via the phone, and she can use *9 to raise her hand. And I don't see anyone over the phone raising their hand. So Vicky is not on.
Councilmember Kalos, are you? And Councilmember Rodriguez. Okay, so just to summarize, we're going to go back to public testimony, but we've had the votes of Community Board 7, 10, 11, and 12. And is there anyone from the community boards who needs to vote now? Please raise your hand. I see Councilmember Kalos. Councilmember Kalos, would you like to vote on the resolution, which is a no with conditions?
I believe Councilmember Kalos is at another vote. He'll be back momentarily.
And Councilmember Powers, has he joined the call?
He's also doing another vote.
All right, so we're going to go back to public testimony.
Okay, and we will start off with Andrea Meyer and then Kayla B. As a reminder, you all have 1.5 minutes to give your public testimony. If you are on the phone and you'd like to testify, please use *9 to raise your hand. Go ahead, Andrea.
Just 1 second, I'm seeing something in the chat or that that Vicky from Community Board 5 is on. And I know Margaret Chin, and I just saw Councilmember Kalos. Councilmember Kalos, the resolution is no with conditions. How do you vote? Cannot hear you, Councilmember.
I don't think Councilmember Kalos can hear us, but Councilmember Powers is on.
Councilmember Powers.
Hi there. Can you just read me the conditions? So apologies. Or I can come back and read it and come back at 11:30, but sorry, I haven't heard the condition.
So we're editing the document based on some comments, and we'll be reading the document a little later after the public testimony. So I can text you back then, and we can send you the edited document so you can start reviewing it. How's that?
That sounds great. I appreciate that.
Okay, Councilmember Chin.
Okay.
Hi, Councilmember Kalos here.
Member Kalos, if you're prepared to vote now, it is a no with conditions. Please know that we are editing the document based on some of the comments today, and that those conditions will be fleshed out a little later, and we will provide it to everyone. Are you prepared to vote now?
Yes, I am prepared to support of the Borough Board's position, which I believe is a yes vote to support a no vote.
So let's say hello to Councilmember Menchaca for me, please. Councilmember Chin.
Hey, hi. Hi, Rosie.
Councilmember Chin. Okay, Andrea, thank you for your patience. You can start your testimony.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, outdoor dining sheds and outdoor dining such as it is now is unsupportable in my neighborhood and on many streets. I live at 65 Carmine Street, where there are over 14 restaurants. In just surrounding 65 Carmine, we have outdoor dining now on 7th Avenue as well as on Carmine. The three restaurants right outside my building already had outdoor dining pre-COVID. Now they have dining in the street, on the sidewalk, as well on Carmine. All three of the restaurant sheds are so close together that there is no room to get into an Uber or taxi, to get deliveries, or for maintenance workers' vehicles. All three have a major rat problem. When I come home after the outdoor dining closes, be it at midnight or 2 a.m., I have seen 11 to 15 rats scurrying around. I have lived here for over 27 years and had never seen one rat. All three restaurants pile all of their garbage on the street that sits for days in standing water filled with garbage and rat feces. One of the sheds, it covers a manhole. Two of the sheds have outdoor speakers. One has a big TV screen, and they blast music from about 3 in the afternoon till they close at night. This is unenforceable. Nobody considers the streets and the neighborhoods that are just restaurant after restaurant and after restaurant. There is less than 2 feet between 3 of the sheds in front of us. This is just unsupportable. That's all.
Thank you, Andrea. Next, we have Kayla B. And before we move to Kayla, I would just like to remind everyone that although some of the votes are taking place before the benefit of public testimony, that you can, that the borough president will be submitting her recommendation next week. So the public testimony will be taken into account for the borough president's recommendation. Thank you. So go ahead, Kayla. And then after Kayla, we have Leith Ardson.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say that I implore the leaders of our city to unconditionally deny this amendment. I was born in the West Village over 30 years ago, and I come from 3 generations of family members who have lived there since the 1940s. One family member and many others in our neighborhood are essential workers. And as was mentioned earlier this morning, we live in one of the most densely populated areas with outdoor restaurant spaces. And this is decimating, it's ruining our homes and our neighborhood. I'm very, very concerned and feel really threatened about the unenforced, unregulated expansion of outdoor restaurant spaces in residential neighborhoods like our own. And I think that these belong on commercial streets. They need to stop creeping into communities where people are trying to live quiet, peaceful lives. There were only 2 small restaurants that opened up on a very small single block of Bank Street and West 4th Street in the West Village. And the collective noise pollution impact of that has been absolutely tremendous. You can hear it from within a 2-block radius, and that's just from 2 restaurants, small restaurants. The noise, if you take a decibel meter, and you measure the collective noise coming from combined voices, from diners, music, cars honking because they're blocked and frustrated and can't drive down the street, it's way above the safe decibel level recommended by the CDC, which is a maximum of 70 decibels over a prolonged period of time. So that needs to be taken into consideration. And then I'll also say too, the climate change issues, huge concerns about waste of energy during the winter and summer months coming from extreme heat and air conditioning.
Thank you very much, Kayla. Next, we have Leith and also Gabrielle Stulman, Mickey McGee, Dale Goodson, Marjorie Dienstag, and Justin Sievers. Go ahead, Leith.
Hi, thank you. I have lived with my family on Cornelia Street since 1989 in the Central Village in 1 5-block radius, predominantly historic residential buildings with small ground level mixed use space. There's over 60 sheds. The sidewalks are now dominated by patrons and workers trying to service the enormous increase in transient patron foot traffic to, from, and at the sheds. The streets have not been cleaned in 18 months. They cannot be accessed to be cleaned. Rats, filth, noise, crowded sidewalks. It's impossible to fully describe the impact to the essential historic character and activity of these famously charming residential streets. There has been no fulsome EAS or EIS done to measure vulnerable residents' outrage and concerns raised in every public process, hearings, and CB meetings available since the program was started. The DOT and DCP presentations throughout the past year and ongoing have been tone deaf to residential concerns raised again and again. Residents can't become accepting of the problems because the problems related to operating sheds are being made permanent. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Next, we have Gabriel Stolman and then Mickey McGee.
Thank you for having me, all city agencies and representatives. I'm a restaurateur in the West Village whose restaurants now have cafes, but previously would not have been allowed to operate under current zoning laws. I support this change. This meeting that I've been attending for the last couple hours has felt like the city agencies versus the community boards. But the truth is the city's residents by and large want and support sidewalk cafes. Just look at the businesses that are using it and the popularity of them. The opposition voices that we hear here are actually the minority. The community board resolutions that we've been listening to do not represent the community views. They represent a minority of residents that have a stronghold on power and disproportionately loud voice and organized activism. They do not speak for the majority of their communities. CB1 talked about this being a lifeline that was okay when the majority of her community fled the city. But now that they're back home, they feel burdened by these cafes. Are you aware of how insulting that feels to those of us that stayed here and fought through this pandemic on the grounds every day, keeping the heartbeat of New York alive, while the affluent fled their homes to ride out the pandemic? And now you return and tell us that our hard work is now in your way. This amendment isn't meant to fix all businesses. And because this amendment cannot fix every type of business, doesn't make it not worth listening to. Instead of only certain restaurants can apply, now we can all apply. It still goes to the community boards and you can still oppose it, which I'm sure you will.
Thank you,
Instead
Gabriel.
of this being an either or, let this be an and let's work together to solve our differences. It doesn't need to be one or nothing.
Thank you,
I
Gabriel. Thank
implore
you.
you to work with me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mickey McGee and then Dale Goodson.
Thank you so much. This is Mickey McGee speaking. I was going to present prepared testimony, but as I've sat here this morning listening to the discussion, I've become increasingly, frankly, enraged. I'm very grateful to the borough president for having a public hearing, but the fact that the public hearing is coming after the voting has already begun on the borough board resolution is very disturbing to me and to people whom I work with. I'm a teacher. I teach in the social sciences. I try and encourage my students to engage in civic participation. In this process and throughout the adoption of this open restaurants debacle, the public and the residents have been an afterthought. And I note that this is inscribed in the putative environmental assessment statement, which is frankly radically deficient. But that said, in that statement, we are called as residents and workers in this community, other users. Our ears are called, the word ears and residents and hearing and listening and noise are not used to describe the violence done to our communities. Rather, our ears are called sensitive receptors. What are we talking about? We are talking about human beings who are trying to live in this city, work in this city, and raise their families.
Thank you,
here.
Mickey. Thank you, Mickey. I just want to remind everyone that the vote has not closed yet, and that the borough president's formal recommendation will be sent in next week. So we will be taking into account all the public testimony we hear today, as well as written testimony that is submitted. Next up, we have Marjorie Deinstedt.
I just want to add something as well. Many of the boards who are voting, the chair is voting how their board voted already. So those votes are going to be consistent after public testimony. And like you said, April, the borough president's comments and recommendations will include everything that we're hearing today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Dale Goodson and then Marjorie Deinstedt.
Thank you. My name is Dale Goodson. I'm the president of the North Avenue A Neighborhood Association in the East Village. My apartment faces Avenue A at 12th Street, and there are 5 bars and 4 restaurants between 12th and 14th Streets, and the noise is ruining my quality of life. Bar crowds on the street are the worst, and the constant din from diners is not much better. We have had almost no input on the open restaurants program and feel that our quality of life has been hijacked and is being sacrificed. Making noise complaints is like playing whack-a-mole, and 311 and DOT complaints have had minimal results and impact. Open restaurants was a good temporary solution for bar and restaurant owners, but putting their customers and their noise on the sidewalks and streets permanently is a disaster for those of us who live above or across the street from these establishments. The noise will be impossible to control. Open restaurants should not be made permanent. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. Next, we have Marjorie Dinestag. And after Marjorie, we have Justin Sivers.
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yes, my name is Marjorie Dinstag. I'm the president of Charles City Association. I'm also an advocate for special needs, specifically autism, and I'm also a policy partner of policymaking for New York State. I have been a resident here in the West Village for over 40 years. And at this point, I am literally begging everybody, especially Gail Brewer, who knows my situation. I have a son with autism. I can't even put it in words what families are coming to me and begging me to do something. People don't take into consideration the fact that the noise that comes out when a bunch of people get together in an open space, our children cannot tolerate that. They go to their rooms, they go to sleep at night. 10 p.m. usually is the time for most children to go to bed. They have to put a pillow over their heads. Do you want them to put a noise cancellation device in order to go to sleep at night? No, they cannot do that. We cannot stand the rats. They are afraid of the rats. People with special needs cannot walk on the sidewalk that is so tiny. My son has space issues, so he cannot walk in a 2 feet little pathways beside what he does. There's a restaurant on 10th and West 4th Street. He actually takes, when the waiters are carrying food, that's for him to just serve himself. So he's been picking French fries from people's plates, French fries from the tray. I mean, please do something, help us. I'm begging you. I'm not begging, I'm not trying to put anybody out of business. I support my local restaurants, but we need to address the issues here.
Thank you, Marjorie. Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna, Councilmember Chin has joined the call. Councilmember, the resolution is a no with conditions. Are you prepared to vote now?
Yes, I am.
And
I
your
do want to
vote
say a few
is?
words.
Yes.
I want to support the resolution because I don't think right now the way it's being proposed, it's good enough. Because, as some of the speakers have spoken, when we did the open restaurant was really to help the local businesses. But it has created so much quality of life problem, especially in my district. And unless we have more oversight and more, guidance to small businesses, it's not going to work. Because even when we were doing sidewalk cafe, there were a lot more oversight and input from community boards, from community residents. So I think we still got a lot of work to do on this. So I do right now support the resolution, and I hope that we can really work out a better solution for this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilwoman. Vicky Barbaro, I understand you're on. Vicky?
Vicky, if you're on the phone, you have to use *6 to unmute.
I see Vicky on by phone. Can you unmute her? Can we unmute her?
No, she's gonna have to use *6.
Okay, I'm asking her to unmute, and I know, and it's not working.
Can she hang up and call back in? I'm trying to unmute her and it's not unmuting her. She has to press *6.
Okay, I'm gonna try to call her directly while we go to, let me just check, is Councilmember Idanis Rodriguez here? Okay. Thank
Rosie?
you. Well, yes.
It's Councilmember Rosenthal. I'm ready to vote.
Okay, Councilwoman, the resolution is a no with conditions, and we are still incorporating some of the comments from today. I know you've been on the call most of the day.
Yes.
And your vote is?
My vote is yes to deny with or unless conditions are met. And I would like to make sure that conditions include continuing the advisory role that community boards and the borough president have as they do now. That has to be included. And second, that there be a robust opportunity for community boards, borough presidents and council members to identify areas that should not have sidewalk cafes or open street restaurants. And I will be pursuing those two issues within the city council, and I'm working to make sure that when the city council votes on this issue, that these things are included both in the zoning resolution and in the law that the city council will need to pass. We can't we can't lose the community board involvement. How else are we gonna know how the community feels unless the community board is very involved in this process? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Rosenthal. I think Vicky Barbero is now unmuted.
Vicky, we're calling on you now. Can you answer and see? Do we have her unmuted?
It looks like she's unmuted now.
Well, can you hear her from my phone, Vicky? Can you speak from my phone?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, you can vote now, Vicky.
Oh, that's great, because I can't get back on at 11:30. Yes, CB5 is definitely in favor. Everything that the council member said, I'm not going to repeat. I agree. We agree with it completely. And if it's made stronger, if the resolution is stronger at around 11:30, we are still a yes vote.
Okay, thank you very much.
Oh, thank goodness. Thank you so much. I'm really sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye. Okay, we will go on to public testimony again.
Okay. Next we have Justin Sivers, followed by Josh Spodek, Pauline Augustine, John Center, and Laura Sewell. Justin, go ahead.
Thank you, everyone, for having me. I'm a resident, longtime resident of the East Village, and I'm also a restaurant owner in the East Village. You know, I hear and I understand many of the things the issues you're talking about, but the biggest issue to me that I've been hearing is about enforcement, which is not actually the fault of the restaurant. I do agree there needs to be better enforcement. There needs to be more fair and equitable enforcement of these things across the whole city. But that is not a reason, in my opinion, to just scrap the whole thing and say no. You know, noise, rats, and trash are three other things that I've been hearing, and they're nothing new. I think we all know that. But, you know, we need to find the actual source of that and fix that. We need better solutions for those things. Agreed, but we needed better solutions for those before, and we need to continue to demand those from our leaders in other ways. You know, this is there's been, how do we know if the community is in favor of it if we don't go to the community boards? I think you clearly see that the community at large, as Gabriel said, I tend to agree, is in favor of this because the places are busy. They do enjoy it. It does add joy and vibrancy and positivity to our city. Not for all, but again, we need to work together to fix that. And I think that, you know, the issue is that how can we as restaurateurs and you as community board members and the general public work together to find a solution that works for everyone. And that's what we're here to do. And we would like to do that with you. But it means it's about taking this first step of letting us do this in a way that we can actually be equitable with the distribution of sidewalk cafes and street cafes, and work together with you to find better solutions, better rules. The emergency rules were just that, in an emergency, but they do need to be modified to have a more permanent solution.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Josh Spodek, followed by Pauline Augustine.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I've been a Manhattan resident since the 80s, Greenwich Village since the 90s. I love the city. And I urge everybody who has not been there, go up to 127th Street to a place called Harlem Grown. It's a small urban garden that one guy put together during the 08 crisis, also during a crisis situation. He put it together with a bunch of school children, and it's a wonderful green space in the city, put together with no budget from the city. It's wonderful. Down the block from me is a small garden where people have to wait in line for years to get a tiny little plot of land that they can grow a plant in. And people all over the city want to build green spaces for their children, for themselves. And suddenly, hundreds of acres of the city are being given away from the public to private property that could be parks, community gardens, playgrounds, bike lanes, farmers markets. These little spaces add up. And I urge some legislator to propose an alternative use for this public space for public good. People have talked about the restaurants need breathing space. We're talking about actually breathing air, not just profits. And all the arguments for the open restaurants equally apply to why not put them in Central Park? That would also be using public space and people would love it. So I urge, please use that space for public good that helps the neighborhood, helps the nation, helps the city, helps the world. There are other uses for these things.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you very much. Pauline, followed by Laura Sewell.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I'm Soho resident. I live on Sullivan Street. And my roommate has lived here for over 50 years. I'm here for 25. Here's an example of what's going on with DOT. There's a shed on my street built directly on top of a manhole. And the street is sinking with a sinkhole in it. Has been there for months before the shed. DOT came in, inspector said, yep, non-compliance to the restaurant owner, gave him 24 hours to rectify, and then the inspector closed the complaint on the spot and marked no follow-up. Is this a joke? DOT was shown in the history of the many recent gas leak problems on the street, and it goes very far back. All of this made no difference at all. What would be a reason to pay attention? Con Ed and the fire department's jobs are essentially made much more dangerous for them as well as us in addition. Complicit, is DOT complicit today in non-enforcement? Is it by choice? I don't know. The word enforcement cannot legitimately be used in what is going on. DOT has a huge problem to take care of this city by itself with thousands and thousands of sidewalks and roads as it is, and they can't handle that. You're going to give them all 12,000 more sheds. And how many more? 6,000 here in Manhattan, or thousands in sidewalks? Community members have outlined the noise issues also and lack of sleep. That experience with me with 11 restaurants on a 25-foot wide street is a real medical issue. And that's me and my roommate's health are being quantitatively and qualitatively measured by medical professionals. And you are you're literally killing us. I want to get that in.
Okay. Thank you, Pauline. Next we have
welcome.
Laura Sewell, followed by Tony Alessino.
Hi, I'm Laura Sewell. I'm the director of the East Village Community Coalition and a longtime East Village resident. EVCC is known for our work to support independent small businesses, as well as the well-being of residents, work which we've redoubled during the COVID-19 crisis. With all the sympathy I have for both the business owners and residents who've spoken today, I'm just going to focus on the ZTA and submit a longer testimony. We do not believe that a one-size-fits-all neighborhood zoning solution is right for the East Village. Our neighborhood zoning is designed to serve the people who live and work here with commercial corridors, commercial overlays, and very different zoning on the residential side streets. Much of the commercial space on residential side streets like East 9th Street, I think most people know, is grandfathered non-conforming. It can remain commercial space as long as it's consistently leased as such, but it cannot expand, to the basement, to the second floor, to the sidewalk. The proposed ZTA would change that by allowing sidewalk seating. And how does that not open the door to curb line seating as exists now on these side streets? Restaurants will find this less expensive side street real estate attractive and push out dry goods stores and services. We're already seeing this. As an organization with long track storefront usage over time, we're all too aware of the independent small businesses we continue to lose to corporate nightlife establishments and restaurant groups. As the children of mom and pop's landlords sell their properties to absentee real estate interests, storefronts are leased to the highest bidder instead of the reliable good neighbor.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you very much. Next we have Tony, followed by Nancy Pasley, Leslie Clark, and Delphine Blue. Go ahead, Tony.
Great, thank you very, very much. I'm a native New Yorker. I was born in Brooklyn in 1946 and moved to Greenwich Village, my first apartment, in 1969. And I've been a property owner in Greenwich Village since.
Oh, I know.
And I'd like to state up front that I am requesting that our borough president, Gail Brewer, unconditionally oppose the DOT permanent open restaurant proposal. Since the current emergency open restaurant policy has been in place, my life has been a nightmare, has been just as other people who have testified have stated. So I'm not going to repeat the issues of quality of life, but the quality of life is totally diminished. The proposed DOT policy, in my opinion, is totally unenforceable. To maintain quality of life for residents, the people who pay real estate, income, and sales taxes that contribute to the city's economy. I do not believe that the Department of Transportation will be able to enforce the noise, the rodent control, garbage and sanitation, safety for pedestrians, and emergency situations. They have, in my opinion, a very paltry record of enforcement, as noted with how they enforce the safety of bike lanes and traffic. I mean, just go to the cross streets of 7th Avenue South at Bedford, Clarkson, and Houston Street, with drivers trying to get into the Holland Tunnel.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you. I'm sorry, your time's up. Next, we have Leslie Clark, followed by Nancy Pasley.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Leslie Clark. I'm on the steering committee of the West Village Residents Association. And I want to talk about the zoning text amendment environmental assessment statement, in which it becomes very clear, in spite of whatever you may have heard here today from the DCP and the DOT, that our sidewalks will now be given to restaurants as of right. The notion that there are going to be rules is in fact not true. You can tell from reading these documents, very long documents, that it is not true. And what this will mean is that the very nature of our streets will change in the West Village. Even if the landlord does not own the sidewalk or own the roadway, that landlord effectively controls that space. And we are already reading in the business press that they are working the public roadway and public sidewalk into their lease negotiations with the next person who's going to open a business there. And that means it's not going to be a toy store, and it's not going to be a stationer's or a dry cleaner. It's going to be another restaurant and another bar. And I'm speaking to you from the zip code that is number 3 in New York State for licensed liquor establishments. This will fundamentally change the character of our neighborhoods, giving it to one industry, just one industry that has already received $2 billion. That's in New York City alone, $2 billion
Thank
in
you, Leslie.
federal money. Thank you.
We have Nancy followed by Delphine Blue.
Thank you. I am a 50-year resident of Manhattan, specifically Greenwich Village. I'm not going to reiterate all the problems that many others have voiced this morning and before. I want to say that this proposed rezoning is a complete perversion of the whole concept of zoning. Zoning is supposed to segregate different types of operations into different parts of the city. Not everything belongs everywhere. In particular, restaurants and bars do not belong everywhere any more than manufacturing uses belong everywhere. The proposed devastating and comprehensive sweeping away of existing protections should not be approved. There are areas of the city, particularly small scale, mixed use or residential areas, where there should not be sidewalk cafes, open sidewalk cafes. There should not be roadbed dining. There should certainly not be open facades, all of which are destroying the nature of our neighborhood and our quality of life. There are reasons, good reasons, why these uses have been prohibited.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
We have Delphine Blue followed by Augustine Hope.
Am I unmuted? Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. I want to thank everybody who's spoken up. I was moved to tears when I was listening to Robert Graff because he just said everything that I want to say. I'm not an organizer. I'm just a regular person. So there's a lot of residents who are not professional organizers who are affected by this. And sadly, there's been so little community involvement that most of my friends don't even know that this is being legislated now. They don't know that these restaurant outdoor sheds are becoming permanent without anybody even knowing about it. I live on a block where there's 14 restaurants. When I walk out my door, it doesn't look like Paris. They're adjacent to each other, and I walk down a narrow corridor of a sidewalk with tenements on one side and plywood sheds on the other side. I cannot access the street. I witnessed my neighbor being wheeled on the narrow sidewalk on a gurney to an ambulance halfway down the block because it was the only place that EMS workers could access the sidewalk to get him into the ambulance. This is real. I have to climb over a plywood wall when I walk my dog at night to avoid the areas where the rats are. This is happening. How can you even consider not listening to residents? We are telling you what our daily lives are like. Please do not approve these restaurant sheds and sidewalk seating.
Thank you, Delphine. Next we have Augustine Hope.
Hold on one second, April. Councilmember Powers has read the conditions and he just logged back on to vote. Councilmember, the resolution is a no with conditions. How do you vote?
I vote no, and I just wanted to explain my vote for a second, if I may. I think the conditions are very reasonable, and if they come to the city council, I'll certainly be supporting to make sure community boards have input and that we are working to make sure these programs include all community input and public input, but also I know many communities are dealing with some of the challenges there. So as we come to the council, I want to make sure we as we legislate this, make sure that we address those in hours of operation and safety conditions and things like that. But ultimately, I'm a very big supporter of the outdoor dining program. 2 of the 3 of my committee boards, I believe, have passed at least 2 have passed resolutions in support of it and voted no against the resolution today on those grounds. So I'm voting no because I would have ideally liked to see us have a resolution that says yes, and then ask for certain conditions here. And for that reason, and my support of outdoor dining, I'm going to be voting no. So thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Before we go back to public testimony, April, did we put in the chat where people could submit written testimony to our office?
We did, and we can
we-
put it again. It's you can email info@manhattanbp.nyc.gov.
Is that the correct way? Isn't it MBP info, or is this a different email address?
No, it's info at.
It's info at?
Yeah.
Okay, info at manhattanbp.nyc.gov. Thank you very much, April. Okay, you can call on whoever's next.
Okay, we have Augustine Hope, then Laura Tenenbaum, Bruce Williams, and Kathy Arnson. Go ahead, Augustine.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here. I'm a 30-year resident of the West Village. I live on Hudson Street. I have a bar next door, has expanded its bar into the street and is open till 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning. I cannot understate the problems that we've had this place, and every time we go and make a complaint, they call the police on us. What I'm most disturbed about this proposal, this open restaurants proposal, is how crude it is. It does not deal with the spectrum of issues that are there. Take, for instance, the downtown. You've heard an awful lot of complaints from downtown below 14th Street. There is a reason for that. The streets are narrow. It's a dense residential community. Midtown, it'll be a whole different story. Another issue is sidewalks versus the roadways. I'm not sure this has been pulled apart properly. Sidewalks have never really been a problem for outdoor dining. It's well managed, it's well maintained. Roadways have been nothing but a problem. It is impossible, it seems, neither DOT nor the SLA, nor the police department, nor DCP, nor whoever it is, this alphabet of agencies, have not been able to manage them. They are a wreck. Another axis is bars versus restaurants. Restaurants tend to close by 10 or 11 at night. Bars like to close by 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. There are very different conditions between the two of them. Another one is hospitality versus small businesses. Hospitality is driving out small businesses.
Thank you,
and of course,
Augustine.
private space versus public space. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Laura.
Hi, thank you. My name is Laura Tenenbaum. I live in Soho. In the 1990s, I chaired both the committee of the community board that dealt with liquor licenses, and also I thereafter was chair of the land use committee. I have therefore had many, many years of listening to public testimony about issues in the community. I am totally against the proposal to amend the text of the zoning resolution in this way. The community it works for the communities right now. It works for the residents, and it works somewhat for most of the restaurants. But the fact of the matter is there are 8 million residents in this city. The other thing that is really a problem is the one-size-fits-all concept. It just does not work for Lower Manhattan. Unlike what some of the restaurateurs said, our restaurants down here, some are indeed patronized by people in the community, but so many of them are destination spots, and they are making life a living hell for my neighbors. I'm lucky. I don't live on a street with restaurants at all, but I have heard from my neighbors. It just does not work. I will separately send in some ideas about texts, but one of the things that really bothers me. Okay, thank you. I will send in comments.
Thank you very much, Laura. Next, we have Bruce Williams, followed by Kathy, and then Shannon Phipps. I want to remind anyone who's on the phone that if you'd like to submit your testimony or speak please use *9. Go ahead, Bruce.
Oh, hi. I wanted to say, the community boards have worked along with the business community for many years to provide a balance between people that live here and work here and run businesses here. And even though I have a lot of complaints, it's worked reasonably well. With this change in the zoning, though, we're completely throwing away all the work that everyone has done to maintain a balance between residential and business. It's just out of control. I don't want to go too much into the enforcement because we know that just doesn't happen. In our neighborhood, they give liquor licenses away like they're candy. They ignore the rules there. And there's not a single restaurant in our area that's in compliance now. So I have no faith that it'll be enforced in the future. Additionally, I'd say there's no sign that there's any contingency planning. You're more than doubling the volume of capacity of most of these restaurants with no provision for restrooms, no provisions for blocking. They're going to let people line up in the streets or on sidewalks. It'll totally inaccessible.
Thank you, Bruce. Next, we have Kathy, followed by Shannon.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm the president of the Central Village Block Association, which covers the streets from 6th Avenue to 7th Avenue between Bleecker and West 4th. I've lived on Cornelia Street for 30 years. Excuse me. I wish I had pictures so everyone could see exactly what's going on these streets. We are living with the noise, music, TVs, and voices. Rats, garbage, the crowds blocking the sidewalk, the streets that are dirty because they're not properly cleaned, the sheds with graffiti where homeless sleep and do other things at night, where their emergency vehicles and delivery trucks try to squeeze by. There's danger to pedestrians, there's danger to especially mobility challenged and strollers and the elderly. It's a really difficult time right now to navigate these streets. And before anything is pushed through, we need to see what the rules are and have them in place. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Shannon Phipps, followed by Stuart Waldman.
Hi, I'm actually the president of Berry Street Alliance, and I live in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. We have similar issues to Manhattan, and I am pregnant. So I have to go into Manhattan to get all of my OB appointments, any kind of medical care. My dentist is there, and I hate going to Manhattan now. I can't access the sidewalk anymore. Most of my physicians are located in Lower Manhattan, and as a pregnant person, there's nowhere for me to walk. It's overloaded with drinkers, diners, smokers, and I'm really appalled at Justin and Gabriel's postulation that they're the only ones who stayed during the pandemic. Many of us have been working from home and work in several different industries, supporting our neighborhoods, supporting our elders in our community. And it is a privilege to have a restaurant and a feeding trough for the affluent to be entertained at. It is not an essential service like a farmer's market or a grocery store. And to give away public space to restaurants that, for all practical purposes in this time period, could have been doing the right thing by not amplifying music and controlling their crowds and dealing with the rat problems, but they haven't. And this is an enforcement issue, and it will not be enforced if this is made permanent. And I need Manhattan to lead because they are affected by it most. Brooklyn is probably affected by it second, and we need to say, no, this is dead on arrival.
Thank you, Shannon. Next, we have Stuart Waldman, followed by Kate Hilliard. Go ahead, Stuart.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
By 9 p.m., the sound outside my window hovers around 75 to 80 decibels. My meter lists that as vacuum cleaner level. But where a vacuum cleaner makes noise for 15 minutes, the din outside my window goes on for hours, not letting up till 1 in the morning. That's one narrow street where one restaurant seats 50 people. Similar streets in Lower Manhattan have 6, 7 or more dining sheds where hundreds of people party until 1 a.m. I hate to think what a decibel meter would read on those streets. It's clear that the Department of City Planning didn't take a meter to any street when they declared there's no appreciable noise from outdoor night dining. No appreciable noise. The lie embedded in that bland, bureaucratic statement is positively Trumpian. I emphasize noise because noise is impossible to enforce short of gagging customers, I guess. I only have a short time, so I won't go into many other elements the sheds have brought, like rats and trash and blocked traffic, stuff we residents see every day, but the DCP refuses to acknowledge. They deny because to tell the truth would point out the absurdity of this zoning text amendment, one that proposes to allow disruptive commercial enterprises to operate in residentially zoned areas, not behind closed doors, but out in the street and all through the night. This is zoning written by Kafka.
Thank you,
Please
Stuart.
deny this.
Thank you, Stuart. And our last public testimony, Kate Hilliard.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. A lot of my neighbors have spoken to many of the macro issues, and I feel it's important to raise the issue around the emotional well-being of people affected by this. I'm a resident of Lower Manhattan for 20 years. I'm a sole small business owner also in Lower Manhattan. I've recently bought an apartment that I was excited to move into, and now every time that I try to stay or live there, I'm filled with dread and depression and anger and frustration, and I feel very left behind. And I don't think that it's fair that residents have not been considered beyond just the fact that we're giving away public land to a private industry. We are the lifeblood of the community. I heard somebody mention that restaurants were the lifeblood of the community. The people that live here are the lifeblood of the community, and we need to be considered. And it's very important that this isn't just black and white text on a page, that people's quality of life and mental health is also considered. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate. Rosie, that was our last public testimony.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask Michael or Lizette to read the resolution into the record, and if you can please screen share so that people can see the resolution. And then we will go to the vote. And I'm also expecting a couple of council members to join us at that point.
Okay, thank you, Rosie. I just want to make sure that everyone can see my screen right now.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so hold on 1 second, Lizette. Council member Levine is on. Council member, we're getting ready to read the reso. Do you need to vote now, or can you wait until after the reso?
You can read the reso. That's fine. Thank you, Rosie.
Okay, thank you, council member.
Thanks, Rosie. So the conditions are on the screen in front of you. The track changes reflect the additions we've made during this meeting. I'll start with number 1, to consult with all community boards and borough presidents regarding the proposed DOT permanent program, including its applicability in residential districts. Provide a plan for enforcement of DOT open restaurant regulations and allow for that plan to be previewed by community boards and borough presidents. Allow community boards to review applications for licenses under the proposed DOT program. That DOT include compliance with program guidelines as key criteria for approving renewal applications and use license revocation as an enforcement option. Prohibit new sidewalk widenings from being used for outdoor dining unless the loss of pedestrian space is included in an analysis for the widening and mitigation measures are ensured. Ensure all sidewalks remain fully accessible and that emergency vehicles have the ability to navigate city streets efficiently. Require restaurants to comply with noise restrictions on amplified music and require patrons to be seated. Include measures to prevent loss of space or safety for users of bike lanes, and present a plan to allow other public uses on sidewalks and roadways. Are there any members who want to make any changes or additions to this set of conditions?
What is exactly the definition of what does it imply? Allow community boards to review applications. What exactly does that mean?
The license applications for the outdoor restaurant. So we can clarify that.
Yeah, I would love to, because I think that was one of the issues that I brought up when I first made my comment about punitive or exclusive. You know, I like to have a broader or more defined definition of what review means in this case.
Yeah, I think Eleazar's point was not so much the program, it was the word review.
Okay.
And you know, that usually implies to us recommending approval or rejection.
Okay, so review and recommend approval.
Yep.
Or denial for.
I had a suggestion. I'm really grateful to the inclusion of all of these by the borough president's staff. I would just like to note that, you know, CB9 voted in favor with conditions because we have very few non-conforming use grandfathered in commercial spaces in residential areas. The testimony today has made it very clear that Lower Manhattan is an entirely different beast. And so I think Councilmember Rosenthal had mentioned, you know, an opportunity for specific areas to prohibit this. And I think that you know, that might be something you want to look into. I know that's an option under the current land use, the zoning text. I don't know if there's a way to do that under the new proposed regulation, but I think that should be a condition, just given the disparity between the way we expect it to affect Lower Manhattan versus Upper Manhattan.
Yeah, I heard that comment from the council member, Barry. I think the first point can probably be expanded. The first condition can be expanded. You know, we already had language about applicability in residential district, but we can put particularly in Lower Manhattan to make that a finer point.
And I have to hop off, but I do vote in favor of the resolution as it is amended before us now.
Thank you.
I wanted to say one other thing. People were throwing around the word ghetto in the chat. You know, as someone of Jewish heritage and someone who represents, you know, West Harlem, the word ghetto means that you cannot leave, and people in the West Village and the village can move out from the village. So while I respect the feedback, I ask that people keep their rhetoric respectful and accurate.
I second that, Barry, from CB6.
I agree. Thank you.
I
agree. Thank you.
As a resident of one of those communities, I also agree. Barry, thank you for bringing that up. As offensive as it sounded.
If people can please raise hand, Janine Keeley, followed by Lowell Kern.
I'd like to have something in here about keeping windows and doors shut. I mean, this is the key issue, is one of the key issues, there's many, is noise in mixed use residential districts where there's a restaurant on the ground floor. And in the past, somebody lives above it, they go to bed, the doors are shut. But then when there's an outdoor restaurant and there's noise coming from outside or sidewalk, I'd like to have something about operable windows. Suggest perhaps maintain the enclosure requirements for eating and drinking establishments in residentially zoned districts.
Just on the point of windows, I don't know if there's anyone on the applicant team who's still on this meeting or on the Zoom. But if there could be some clarification, my understanding is that the typical enclosed structures that we're seeing under the temporary program would not be allowed in the proposed DOT permanent program. Is there someone on the call who can clarify? If not,
I'm
we can.
not talking about outside, I'm talking about the inside restaurants keeping the doors closed. And I put some suggested language in the chat. So I just want to clarify on that. And
So yeah, I think there's maybe a jurisdiction issue because I'm not sure which agency would govern the window, and door situation within a commercial space essentially. But we can make a note of it. I just want to highlight that I'm not sure that this would fall under the provision of the DOT necessarily.
And then I do want to require restaurants to comply with noise restrictions on amplified music. Right now, amplified music is not allowed outside. So I'd like that to be more explicit there because, it suggests that there might be some wiggle room. There is no amplified music outside. So we should be, noise complaints are some of the biggest problems. And it's, we hear it all throughout, we hear it in community board too, but we hear it in other boroughs. People need to go to work the next day and they can't sleep. And then in terms of prevent loss of bike or safety for users of bike lanes, that's a little squishy too. I mean, right now, it's beyond Community Board 2, I go into Tammy's district and Community Board 1, you bike down West Broadway, there's outdoor restaurant, roadbed dining throughout the bike lane, and you basically have to bike in the middle of the road. So is the city gonna, if you put a roadbed over a bike lane, you get rid of it. So I really don't think we can allow roadbed dining on a bike lane.
And Janine, just so you know, the bike lane was put in after the roadbed, but they didn't look at nor accommodate the changes that they had made from point A to point B. So the overlap we were told will be fixed at a later date.
Okay, well, good. But I do think there needs to be something because right now, or you're biking on Grand Street, from Community Board 2 to Community Board 3, and you have to go really slow and watch out for people who are buying ice cream and crossing the bike lane to go sit in their chair in the roadbed seating area. And that's very dangerous for everyone, pedestrians and cyclists. And the only thing I don't really see in here is at all, which we've heard a lot, is addressing the vermin issue. And there hasn't been, there needs to be some studies and solutions because that is a problem. I don't have the answer because it needs to be studied.
Sure, I can add, I think that might fit best in the second point. Excuse me, provide a plan for enforcement, as well as sanitation. Folks have a stronger language that they would suggest.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, one last thing in terms of accessibility. What's not in here is because they're getting rid of the 3-foot service aisle. And when you add that in, it's really hard to walk down the sidewalk now as an able-bodied person. And I think that's just another contributing factor, getting rid of that 3-foot service aisle. Thank you.
So just to clarify on your final point, Janine, is this, I think, something that might fit into what is now the new 6th condition in the resolution?
muted myself, fully accessible, including maintaining the 3-foot service aisle.
You mean beyond the 4-foot clearance, correct?
Exactly. Yes.
That needs to be really clear. That the 4-foot clearance does not include the 3-foot service aisle.
Okay, so ensure all sidewalks remain fully accessible, including maintaining the 3-foot service aisle in addition to the 4-foot clearance requirement, and that emergency vehicles have the ability to navigate city streets efficiently. Does that sound like it addresses those concerns?
Yep.
Lowell?
Lizette, there's a carve out right now in the zoning text for special districts, and we would like that carried forward.
Okay. I think that fits best in either within the first point.
Probably within the
or,
first point, applicability in residential districts and special districts.
Thank you.
Otherwise, I think you guys did a great job in the hour I went and did my day job. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Levine is raising his hand, so Tammy, I'm going to call on him first, and then it's Tammy followed by Kyle. Councilmember.
Thank you so much, Rosie, and I'm sorry to barge in just on a very tight schedule today. Like so many of you, I want to say that I love outdoor dining. I think it's one of the things that saved New York City in the worst of the pandemic. I also think that to make it work on a permanent basis, it has to accommodate the unique neighborhood. And I don't think a one-size-fits-all solution works on a long-term basis. So for that reason, I really appreciate the work of the borough president and the team on crafting this resolution, and I will be voting yes.
Thank you, Council Member. I understand Council Member Carlina Rivera is on the call. I understand she's raising her hand, but I do not see a raised hand. Council Member, if you can hear me, can you unmute and or raise your hand? Oh, there you go. Okay.
My hand. Can you see me? No, you can't see me though.
I cannot see you, but I see your name now.
Here we go.
The resolution is currently a no with conditions. So if you vote yes, you'd be voting no with conditions. The chairs are adding some tweaks to the conditions, and we've already made some of those changes, but there are more chairs who are raising their hands. Are you prepared to vote now, Council Member?
I am, and I want to thank you for the accommodation. It is a stated day. I want to thank everyone for their work in improving this resolution. I do align myself with some of the comments that Councilmember Levine made, in that we have many concerns on outdoor dining that we're trying to address with this resolution. And I realize, working with the community board, the noise, protecting pedestrians and cyclists, and making sure this remains a vibrant part of our economy is our priority, while also taking into account quality of life. So thank you to everyone for putting in their comments. I've heard some of the additions and tweaks you've made thus far, and I appreciate your intention and everything you all have done. So with that, I want to thank you, Rosie, the borough president, all of the boards, and I vote aye.
Thank you very much, Council Member. I'm just going to double check. I was told that Council Member Rodriguez was logging on. Council Member Idanis Rodriguez, are you on the call? Okay. So Lowell, you still have your hand up. Did you?
No, I just forgot to lower my hand. Sorry, Rosie.
Okay.
But I'm voting yes. And do you need me to stick around if I vote yes now?
I can mark you down if you have to leave right now as a yes to
Yeah,
no
I
with
got,
conditions.
the recommendations, the changes that the board chairs have made, I appreciate. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Tammy, followed by Kyle.
Thank you very
So
much,
just
Rosie.
before, I just want to highlight, I moved some of the language around just to give it a little bit more clarity. On the first condition, I just made a, because it was, we added the part about Lower Manhattan, so it now reads applicability in residential districts, particularly in Lower Manhattan, and that the sidewalk cafe regulations in special zoning districts be retained.
So
Thank you.
thank you, Lisette. I want to make it though clear that we're not necessarily saying residential districts in Lower Manhattan, because as you know, CB1 is very much a mixed use. So that that doesn't read as, it looks to me on its reading that applicable in residential districts, particularly in Lower Manhattan, it's mixed use districts that's, with residential above. That's the concern, one of the concerns we have. I also want to clarify, it doesn't specifically put, in terms of the stronger language, one of the concerns that we have in the community board is to ensure that the timeline and process when it is created, it does follow the come to the community board for stipulations and approvals before, not consult, the timeline of how this works for public input is a concern. And I say this because we got notification this month for a permitted use of municipal space, which is the new form for the sidewalk cafe.
Okay, so Tammy, you're referring to the third point about community board review?
Right. It's review and recommendation prior to approval by DOT.
Okay, so I can clarify that. Thank you.
And then I did also want to add, one of the things that makes us so unique down in CB1 is the number of tourists and business people that we have, which has changed the open restaurant experience for the residents in exponential ways. Very, very different under the pandemic versus where we are today. And without having a true return to normalcy, for whatever that may be, because we are still in a pandemic, we actually are unable to truly see how the extension is fitting within the character and constructs of life in each district. I don't know how to get that on here, but that is something, one of the reasons that is an unless. This should not be put into place, and policies should not be made based on pandemic complaints and things like that. We're not back to full service yet. We have major corporations, and including city government offices, that are not full. We have corporations that have not returned. So I'm looking at thousands and thousands of people who have not come back, who will come back and will go in. None of these rules that they're talking about should be made until we have some return to normalcy. And that needs to be put in here about when the crafting of these rules are done, what data they're looking at. Because if they're looking at data for when I didn't have the 200,000 employees down here, it's going to be very different for us. And in number 3, we also need to add roadbed dining.
Hey.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Tammy. Kyle had his hand up before, and it's not up anymore. And
yeah,
then...
I just put it down to make it easier. Okay. But I just wanted to make a quick comment because we're now approaching almost 4 hours on this. I just wanted to clarify that this specific text amendment is simply about removing the limitations as to who can apply to open, restaurants. So for me, some of these, like while I personally am in agreement with a lot of these conditions, I think we're kind of litigating something that's out of the scope of this particular city text amendment. For a lot of the complaints that we're seeing from the public, absolutely understand, but that doesn't but opposing this particular resolution doesn't mean that some of those restaurants would then be leaving, because some of those can still apply to it. While all of these make sense, I think, maybe a follow-up to this as well that is more comprehensive about the ways that open restaurants should be amended can be something else, but I don't want to conflate two separate things into one particular resolution, because the primary function of this citywide text amendment is to get rid of the limitations as to who can apply, not that we are solidifying open restaurants or anything of that nature. So I just wanted to make that quick comment as we proceed with this.
Thank you, Kyle. Janine? You're muted, Janine, and then Russell.
Yeah. I just wanted to get in some comment about we need to address the impact on sort of dry retail, because obviously in the high density districts downtown, this is going to make eating and drinking establishments a much more attractive financial option for people who are leasing space. And we're concerned that it's going to drive out that sort of the dry retail uses. So if we could just, that hasn't been studied, but I want to make sure that there's we get that in there, because that's a big concern about services that for the local population.
So you want that, you want it just to be studied, no other requests in the conditions?
Yeah, because you have to, there may need to be some, consider limits on, consider limits given the impact on the anti-competitive impact on non-eating and drinking establishments.
Okay.
Okay, so Russell, you have your hand up. When we finish making whatever tweaks to the conditions, we will open the vote again to the remaining members who haven't voted yet. Russell.
Yeah, on number 4, I just want to make sure that this is, I think, a good, Tammy mentioned this and it's in the chat, that it should say sidewalk and roadway cafes.
Thank you very much, Russell.
And otherwise,
sorry, I'm sorry, I think I missed the beginning of that. Is that on a specific point or on all of the points in the conditions?
I think it applies to number 4. I don't think it really. Specific.
Overall, it should apply, simply because when we're talking about this, although they keep saying that's not included in this, they have linked them in the past. There was conversation about linkage in the future. So yeah.
In terms of specific line edits, if others folks think it should go somewhere else other than in addition to 4, then they should say so. But I think the line edit where it needs to be added is at number 4. And I'm ready to vote. I would like to call the question if that's.
I have one comment of mine still isn't in there. Sorry, I'm trying to zoom in on the screen. It's in terms of the open windows, unless I'm missing this. I'm trying to want to maintain the enclosure requirement for eating and drinking establishments in residentially zoned districts. I can put that in the chat again.
No, there's no need. I'm just looking for the right spot to put it in.
Oh, okay.
Like I said, I think I'm not sure that that's within the purview of this, but we will include it.
Well, it's currently in ZR 5234 that's being removed. So it essentially, by removing the zoning text amendment, it takes this protection out.
Okay, Janine, if you could just read that to me one more time.
Sure, and I'm gonna send it to you as well. Maintain the enclosure requirements for eating and drinking establishments in residentially zoned districts, which is currently in ZR 52-34. And I put that in the chat to you as well as that. It's easier to copy it. And I believe is the roadway dining. So number 4, several of us have asked for sidewalk cafes and roadway dining prior to final DOT approval.
I'm sorry, Janine. I was having some issues. I can't do the chat. It just messes me up. That's why I just wanted you to read it to me. Was that last point you made directed at me? You're on mute.
Yeah.
Number 4, several of us, it says the second line, it says allow community board to review and recommend approval or denial for sidewalk cafes and roadbed dining. Prior to, thank you.
Call the question.
Hold on one second. I know Cecily Harris is multitasking. She had sent me and wanted to know if we can add, and I don't know if it has been because I've been going back and forth, condition that restaurant must have a sanitation plan and a rat abatement plan. Can that be put in there or is it already in there?
It is not. Let me look for the best place to include that point. I think this would be it. Require. Sorry, what are the 2 plans? Sanitation and rat abatement?
Correct.
And that would be as part of their application process? Or did she not specify?
She did not specify, but that seems like a good place to put it unless someone else wants to make another suggestion.
Any
Okay.
other edits?
So Russell has called a question. If there are any other edits, please raise your hand now. Tammy.
Sorry, I just have a question. Does this, we put in here about the special districts, does this then remove the possibility of doing small business improvement zones? Because there is one text amendment that covers every type of business within this. So there would be no way to be able to create zoning with small, in business improvement districts anywhere on blocks or anything. Would this supersede all of that and therefore an unintended consequence disallow anything like that?
Fortunately, Tammy, I don't think I can answer that question. That would be one for the applicant team. And I don't think we have anyone on still.
Then that should.
This is Carolyn from City Planning. I've rejoined if you'd like to take that question.
Yes, Carolyn.
So if I understand the question, it is whether or not the zoning change in any way precludes a business improvement district from being built or any other kind of support service for small businesses. Is that a correct understanding?
So for argument's sake, we have an area. We decide that this is going to be turned into a small business improvement district or zone, which will then prevent large corporations, much like in places like California have this, that it prioritizes small businesses and the ability of them to do business in that zone. This zoning text amendment removes all barriers based on geography.
This text amendment removes any relationship from the zoning resolution to an outdoor cafe. If what you're describing is a zoning change that would apply in, like, for instance, a commercial district, but limit the kinds of businesses that could occur in a commercial district, that's a different kind of text amendment. And I don't think that this text amendment related to outdoor dining would affect it. And obviously any other program that is not related to zoning, but has to do with how the city interacts with businesses, that's a totally separate matter that this would have nothing to do with. But if specifically what you're talking about is, would this interact with a different kind of zoning text amendment that limited the kinds of businesses that could occur on a commercial street in general? The answer is no. It sounds to me like you're describing a change to commercial use groups.
Correct. Thank you.
So these are the final edits to the resolution, to the conditions to the resolution. Okay. I will now start to call everyone who has not voted as of yet. Community Board 1.
Community Board
Tammy?
1, yeah. Community Board 1 votes yes.
Community Board 2.
Community Board 2 abstains because we have not voted yet.
Community Board 4 voted yes. Community Board 5 voted yes. Community Board 6.
Community Board 6 votes no.
Community Board 7 voted yes. Community Board 8.
No.
Community Board 9 voted yes. Community Board 10 voted yes. Community Board 11 abstained. Community Board 12 voted yes. Borough President, do you want to vote now or after?
I can vote now because I'll vote yes. I want to say, I believe my concern is addressed by the input from the community, which is those sheds that are in the street roadbed that are not being used and that have, secured some kind of markings and seem to be derelict. But I think this resolution addresses it by making sure there's input as the time goes on. But that is my concern. I vote yes, and thank everybody for their input.
Thank you, Madam Borough President. Councilmember Chin voted yes. Councilmember Rivera voted yes. Councilmember Powers voted no. Councilmember Kalos voted yes. Councilmember Rosenthal voted yes. Councilmember Levine voted yes. Councilmember Ayala, are you on the call?
I don't see her, but I do see Councilmember Rodriguez.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Councilmember.
Thank you.
So, Councilmember Ayala going once, twice. Okay. Borough President, do you want me to keep the vote open and try to get Councilmember Ayala? We have a quorum and we have we can close the vote now.
I would close the vote now.
Okay, so we are officially closing the vote. And of 23 voting members, 19 showed up. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We have 14 yeses to no with conditions. We have 2 abstentions, and we have 3 noes for a total of the 19 members who showed up today to vote. And that is the final vote. 14 yes, 2 abstentions, and 3 noes. Thank you, everyone, and to all the chairs and council members for your patience, and to the members of the public who showed up to testify, and to my colleagues as we've been multitasking this morning. It is now 12 o'clock. Do we move on to to chair reports, or is there a motion to submit your reports in writing to us?
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, as
Aye.
long as you share the chair reports with everybody so we can see what's going on in everybody's district.
Will do. Anyone voting no?
I put something in the chat. I just want to acknowledge that last week, Doris Diether, the longest serving community board member ever, passed away. She served on the community board for 57 years. And I know people outside of many people knew her, but many people didn't. And I just put that in the chat. I just want to acknowledge that. Sorry. Thank you.
She was fabulous.
Thank you. Anyone abstaining? So we will be in touch. Please send me your chair reports and we will get that out to everyone. Borough President Brewer. It is time for the Borough President's report. Do you want to?
We will submit it with everybody else. Absolutely.
Okay, do you want to say something about Doris? It's all been.
Well, I love long-serving people. And she certainly was one of them. I don't want to belabor. I think people want to go, Rosie, and Janine spoke well of her. She's, we submitted a proclamation sometime in her behalf, and we have, thank you. We should close out.
Okay. I just want to add, I've known Doris. I met her when I was the chief of staff to Councilmember Margarita Lopez. I learned everything I knew from zoning from her and from Lisa Kaplan from Community Board 3. It was just an honor to know her, and I'm gonna miss getting her recipes, her typewritten recipes in the mail. Godspeed, Doris. So if there is a motion to adjourn the meeting and a second, I will entertain that motion.
Motion.
Seconded.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? The ayes have it. Thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.